Om Jaya Tvam Devi Chamunde Jaya Bhutapaharini Jaya Sarvagate Devi Kalaratri Namostute Om Jayanti Mangala Kali Bhadra Kali Kapalini Durga Shiva Kshama Dhatri Swaha Swadha Namostute Swaha Swadha Namostute Om Namo Devī Māhātmyam Shivaye Satatam Namaha Namo Prakrite Bhadraye Niyata Pranata Smatam. Om, we remember you always, O Mother. Niyata Pranata Smatam. You who are the goddess, the great goddess. Namo Devī Māhātmyam. Salutations to you who are both terrifying, Bhadrakali, and as well as gentle. You who are embodied as all of this nature that appears before me. We salute thee, O Mother. You who are the dispeller of ghosts. Jayatvam Devi. Chamunde, the killer of the demons, Chanda and Munda. You who are embodied as the mantras Swaha, Swadha and others. Salutations to that skull-wielding Kali, Kapalini, who is embodied as this very moment. Oh, may this be an offering at thy lotus feet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And now we'll do the Mangalacharna, the prayer of invocation from the Paramārthasāra, which expresses just in bija form, in a nutshell, the entire Śaiva metaphysic. Om Param Parastham Gahanadanadim Ekam Nivishtham Bahudha Guhasu Sarvalayam Sarvacharacharastham Tvameva Shambhu Sharanam Prapadye Tvameva Shambhu Sharanam Prapadye Tvameva Shambhu Sharanam Prapadye. Okay, fella, what are you doing? Okay. So, last night, we had a nice conversation. What I wanted to do last night was I thought I would lead you directly into the text, right into the Devī Māhātmyam, and consider the first teaching that we get from the text. Because as you know, like with the Bhagavad Gītā, like with many of the teachings, like say the Upanishads, there's often like a mythological setup, which is story, and the teaching is embedded in the story. So you're familiar with the Mahabharata, and there it's a story of like a fratricidal war. And so the family is divided, and they're going to war with one another, and the whole teaching of the Gita happens on the battlefield. And many of the commentators of the Gita, like Shankara being the best example here, didn't feel it was necessary to like comment on the story. The story is well known, and arguably it's like a cocktail. Like the goal is to get arguably the alcohol into the system. The cocktail is just there to make the like delivery more pleasant. So you can see the story as a kind of sweetener or as a kind of pineapple juice or something, and the point is the vodka. You just want to get the substance into the body. So therefore, like many commentators like Sri Shankara, they start their commentary when the philosophical teaching begins. So take the Bhagavad Gītā, for instance. Everything up to chapter 2, like verse 10 or 11, is just like mythological preamble. It's like a story. And again, by mythology is not meant like fictional. Like these are itihasas, meaning histories that people take very seriously. But be that as it may, it's not like, arguably it's not the teaching, according to Sri Shankara. The teaching starts with the contemplation on death being no more than a change of clothes that we get in like verse 10 or 11 in chapter 2. So that's where Shankara's commentary is going to start. He's going to leave all the rest of it out. But Swami Vivekananda, he actually emphasized the first chapter quite a bit. In fact, all of the chapters in the Gita, all 18 chapters, are named something, and they're named something yoga. So yoga here, yukti or yoga, meaning like a means or a method or a practice. Each chapter is about a different practice. Like chapter 2 is called Sankhya Yoga. It's a kind of jnana yoga, sort of inquiry into what the true nature of the jiva is. And through that inquiry, we realize Prakriti cha karmani kriyanani sarvashaha. The word prakriti to refer to like reality appearing to me, the real witness consciousness, that's a Sankhyan term. And it's a term obviously like rooted in a Sankhyan teaching, because here in the first teaching, arguably in the Bhagavad Gītā, which Shankara thinks starts in chapter 2, I realize through this inquiry that I am not Prakriti. I am not the world of the 5 bhutas. I am not the world of the 5 tanmatras. I am none of these elements. Na cha vyoma bhumi, na tejo, na vayu. But more importantly, na manno buddhyankara chittani naham. I am not the mind, nor am I the intellect, nor am I the ego, nor am I like my memories. Like I disambiguate myself from the mental apparatus, which usually constitutes myself. Like I consider myself to be this embodied mental experiencing being. But here in the first opening like line from Shankara's Nirvana Shatakam, we immediately disambiguate ourselves from that. We say, I am not the mind. in which thoughts appear. I am not the intellect, the discerning faculty that makes sense of what thoughts are appearing in the mind. I am not even my sense of me. Because if I'm able to say, this is me, this is who I am, this is my age, this is my gender, this is my personality, the moment I'm able to say that, I've already objectified myself. So me appearing as an object will naturally be on the side of Prakriti. All of this we learn from chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga. So then I say, okay, I'm not my ego, I'm not my sense of self, because after all, as we've just established, it's a sense. I sense myself. Therefore, I am the one to whom that sense of self occurred. It's a very subtle teaching. Mano buddhyankara chittani naham nacha shrotra jive nacha grana netre. I am not any of my organs of perception. And importantly, I'm not the vak, pani, pado, upasta, payu. I'm not any of the organs of action. So what we do in Sankhya Yoga is an inquiry into reality that culminates with the discovery that I am not the objects of my experience. And so I can't say I am any age. I can't say I'm any gender. I can't say I'm anything. I'm neither happy nor sad. These are all things that just appear. Na sukham. There's no saukyam, na dukham. There's no joy, there's no sorrow. What then is there? There is me. Aham nirvikalpo, nirakara rupo. I am of that undivided consciousness, which is beyond all thought, which cannot be known, yet it is the knower. And more importantly, it is one. It is a non-dual reality in which everything appears. So this is what Shankara wants to start with, yes? But arguably, before we get to Sankhya Yoga, and chapter 3 is Karma Yoga and whatnot, before we get to any of these yogas, there's one very, very important yoga that we start off with in the Bhagavad Gītā, and that's called Vishada Yoga. Vishada means the yoga of depression, the yoga of grief. And this is often overlooked because it's just presupposed. It's presupposed that if you're coming to spiritual life, it's usually grief that brings you here. It's some great tragedy, some suffering, you lost a loved one, or you've gone through some physical suffering, or there's like an environmental collapse or economic collapse or something. There's something that necessarily happened that causes you to reevaluate what you consider to be real and true, and more importantly, good. Like what is essentially going to make you happy. That should be up for review whenever one of these like tragic events happen in your life. So we talked last night about 4 very important philosophical words, and they are important words actually insofar as we're assessing a tradition and assessing what that tradition can do for us. The first word that I introduced last night, a very important one, is soteriology. Soteriology is the study of arguably what makes a human happy. If we want to be very academic about it, it's like what causes you to be saved. So it's a very Christian academic context. It's usually used in Christian circles. It means to be saved. Like, what would it take for a Christian to be saved? Is it just the acceptance of the Christ's sacrifice? Like some Christians will say the moment you accept the Christ and you accept his sacrifice, the vicarious atonement that he does through being crucified, then you're already saved. Like if you don't accept the Christ, you're not saved, you won't get into heaven. But if you just like intellectually assent to the fact that there was this guy and he died for our sins and he was in fact God, he was a son of God who was synonymous with God, then you're saved. So the salvific efficiency then, or rather the salvific efficacy, is actionable upon intellectual assent or belief in the Christ. Other Christians won't say that. You know, like in the Eastern Orthodox traditions, Armenian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, you have to go further than that actually. It's not just enough to intellectually assent to the Christ's sacrifice. You have to experience the Christ. You have to become Christ-like, which often involves a very, very intense ascetic process of penance. So this is called the hesychastic tradition. Hesychastic or something, hesychastic or hesychism or something like that. I don't exactly know how you spell it actually in English. Also, Harshada ji, Jaima, good to see you. I tuned in a little bit for your talk and I found it really, really awesome. Yeah. You were like asking about how to articulate questions, how to articulate teachings outside of one's lineage. Was that me? No. I was like, wait, somebody tangential to this lineage? I was like, that sounds a little bit like... Anyway, I enjoyed your interview very much, Ji. Jaima. So in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, it's like hesychasm is an important thing. It's like you have to go out into the desert and you have to do some kind of penance. So we have in mind here someone like Evagrius of Pontius. He's like sitting in a well in the middle of the night. It's like 3 a.m. He's in cold water and he's praying in the well, shivering his butt off or something like that. So for him, it wasn't enough to just accept the Christ sacrifice at Calvary. Like that's important. But more than that, he has to do some kind of spiritual practice that creates the feeling of Christ in his heart. That is like, you know, like nowadays in the New Age world, they call it Christ consciousness or something like that. So becoming Christ-like, that's what it means to be saved. So it's a debate among Christians, and arguably if we can expand that debate among all the religious traditions of the world, what does it mean to be saved? not just in a Christian context, but what does it mean to attain nirvana? In the southern Buddhist schools, they have a very different view of that. It's enough to just empty the 5 skandhas, panchaskandhas, of their meaning. That's it. Once you do that, once you realize the body is empty, the mind is empty, the ego is empty, even consciousness, once you realize vijnana, basic consciousness, is empty, then arguably you're free. This is what the Vipassana tradition will say, the southern Buddhist, Theravadan Buddhist tradition will say. But notice, that's not accepted by the Mahayana or northern Buddhist traditions. There they say that even if you attain liberation, if you attain nirvana for yourself, that's not the complete teaching, because the Buddha also taught mahakaruna, compassion. So even if you're free, you're an arhat or whatever, what about the rest of the world? What about other beings? You have to also think about them, and you have to free them as well. It's not enough for you yourself to be free. That's a partial liberation. Any liberation that leaves the world alone, that doesn't consider the rest of the world, is such a cheap kind of liberation. So what the Mahayana tradition will do is they will somewhat disparagingly refer to Theravadan Buddhism as the Hinayana, the narrow way or the little way. This is almost pejorative. This is not to say the Mahayana tradition doesn't acknowledge its debt to the Theravadan school. Of course, the Theravadan, the word means the teaching of the elders. They came first. But the Mahayana develops the tradition and says, no, the second thing is to consider the world. And that's where you get these very subtle and nuanced and profound teachings on idealism. It's called Yogacara Buddhism, or sometimes it's referred to outside the tradition as Chitta Matra Buddhism, mind-only school. So in this version of Buddhism, you look at the world and you say, where is it? Where is the world? And the realization that you have upon inquiry is this, that the world exists only within my experience. It is entirely internal to consciousness. So you'll get masters like Nagarjuna saying things like Nila and Nila Darshana Abhed. There's no difference between seeing blue and the color blue. So blueness, Nilatwa, blueness in the world, which again is just a stock term that means any sense experience, is non-different or inseparable from the experiencing of it. Notice it's a very idealistic claim, that there is no world apart from my experience of said world. So once you realize this, all you have to do then is empty the mind. Once you empty the mind of its inherent reality, the whole world is just empty. And then you've done the second part of the teaching. You've taught emptiness to others by realizing that everything is empty. So this is called Chittamatra Yogacara. This develops into emptiness proper, the Nagarjuna kind of led Madhyamika school, which has a few different interpretations, Shentong being, of course, one that comes closest to the Śaiva interpretation. But when you put all this together, you find that Buddhism has different views as to what it means to be saved. So whether it's a Christian trying to be saved, whether it's a Buddhist attaining nirvana, and certainly whether it's a Śaiva articulating freedom, they're all going to have a different idea about soteriology, about what constitutes final release or final liberation. There's a text which I love, and it's called Moksha Karika. I'm not sure it's available in English, but it's a short treatise, a comparative treatise on all the different models of liberation that we get in the Śaiva world. What I like about this text is it confines itself to Śaiva schools of thought. I think there are 8 or so Śaiva schools that this author considers, Satyajyoti. And so what Satyajyoti is going to do is he's going to say, look, all of these different schools have a different idea about what it means to be free. Some of them are just about ending suffering. For instance, I was telling you last night, the Pashupata dualist, who we don't actually know very much about. We don't really have many texts from them. We don't have any texts from them, actually. Even the Pashupata Sutra is not really a text of this tradition. But what we learn from these texts, like these comparative manuals on things, we learn that they don't really talk about bliss or the attainment of something. Rather, they're entirely oriented towards the negation of something. Atyantika dukkha nivriti. And you'll see early Buddhist and early Jains kind of share a similar view, where it's not about gaining something or going somewhere or being saved. It's about getting away from suffering, ending suffering, deleting misery. Atyantika, categorical, dukkha, suffering, nivriti, the permanent and categorical end of all suffering, cessation of suffering. This is the goal of the Pashupata dualist. And then you get this thing called the Lakulisha reform. So historically speaking, Lakulisha was probably a cremation ground dwelling Pashupata himself, but he articulates a more qualified non-dualist view. There are many differences between the Lakulisha version and the version that came before. But one key difference is this idea of attaining something. So in the Lakulisha school, you gain sarvagya, you gain omniscience, and you gain kartritva, agency, you gain omnipotence as a result of attaining liberation. So you become like Shiva. You don't become Shiva, you become like Shiva. tadatmya. Your being shares in Shiva's being. And so you gain Shiva's qualities. And arguably those qualities will be omniscience, omnipotence, etc. And naturally, beyond just power, there's also bliss. So you attain bliss and you attain power. Now comes an incredibly sophisticated discussion about how that happens. Does it arise? Is it utpatti, meaning is this something that awakens in you when you attain liberation? If so, we have a serious problem. Because anything that starts can also end. So if something begins in time, if it has a starting point, it's liable to ending in time as well. It's subject to time. So utpatti, the arising of omniscience and omnipotence, or even the arising of bliss, might not be desirable, because anything that arises will eventually fade away. In fact, there's even a logical law in the Nyayika school. The Nyaya school says it's a counterfactual. It's called a pratiyogin. Once you posit something, its opposite is also somewhat posited. The Bhagavad Gītā will play on this idea. If there's day, there must be night. And so if the body ends, that itself is proof of reincarnation. Nothing ends that doesn't start again. I know it's an inductive fact. If you look at the world, the sun sets, it will rise. A sun that sets rises, therefore a sun that rises sets. So if the body dies, it would be logically improbable for it not to be reborn. That's just a fact. Because if a body is born, it's a logical necessity that it must die. So I'm definitely like simplifying this idea or trivializing a little bit this idea, but more or less this is called the pratiyogin in Nyaya. And so in Nyaya, if you posit something, you naturally also assert its counterfactual or its opposite. So if then liberation is something that arises, it must also be something that dissolves or fades away. So that can't be it. So what this Moksha Karaka author is going to do is he's going to like reject that definition of liberation. He's also going to reject the definition that says, oh, it's just the cessation of suffering. Because that's kind of nihilistic. Like there's nothing like positive about that. There's nothing to be gained. And if it's just the deletion of the individual, then yes, all your problems are gone. But is that really what you want? Swami Vivekananda made a funny point here. He said it's like there's a mosquito on your head. And then somebody comes to like rid you of the mosquito. So it gives you a nice big whack on the head. But he doesn't just kill the mosquito, he also kills the man. So, is your problem solved? Fuck yeah. Like, you don't have a mosquito on your head anymore. But you also, like, aren't there. You don't have a head. Like, you're dead. So what's the point? Why did you need your problem to be solved if you weren't going to be around to enjoy the solution of the problem? So, dukkha nivritti, the cessation of suffering without the attainment of something, is rejected. Then the attainment of something that is considered to be arising upon realization, that's also to be rejected. And then there's another view. The view of transference. So here, if you come near something, won't you acquire the qualities of that thing? And as long as you stay near that thing, you will always have those properties. So notice, now it's not that it's arising in you, it's coming to you through transference. This is actually a very sophisticated view. So if I'm near a fire, don't you think I'll feel hot? But notice, the fire will never stop being hot. The fire never started to be hot, and nor will it stop being hot. Isn't that important? The heat is the swadharma of the Agni, of the Tejas. Fire's nature is to be hot. Mine might not be. Like, I am not naturally hot. I don't know. The smoke shop lady, she had a different view of that. But my nature might not necessarily be inherently hot. But if I go near a fire, won't I acquire some of that heat? My clothes will become hot. My body will become hot. I'll feel heat. And you'll see, Sri Ramakrishna, he sometimes references this view too. Like if you're feeling hot, you should go near the Ganga. The closer you get to the Ganga, the cooler you'll feel. There's something about the Ganga that's very cooling. So this he uses often in the context of sadhu sangha. And Harshadaji was actually making a really good point in the talk that I just saw. He was talking about yukti and shakti. And that's a really delicious discussion, actually. You know, like that. If you say shakti comes from yukti, then you're saying shakti is caused. That's a big problem, because then, again, it's the same thing with utpatti. If it arises, it must fade away. How can Shakti be the kind of thing that arises and then fades away? Also, it's manifestly blasphemous to claim that some practice will give you Shakti, as if Shakti can be controlled through spiritual practice. Because then, she is to be used. Remember the word yukti or yoga coming from the very ancient root yuj, one of the oldest dhatus in Sanskrit. That word yuj is the same as the English word use. Are you saying that mother is something that you can use? Like I flip a switch and electricity lights up my room? In India, in some rural places, it's still practiced to this day. If you turn a light on, people will literally stop what they're doing and pray to the light. It's so beautiful. That's how we treat light in India. When you light a lamp, you pray to it. And by the way, in Kerala, we often find it to be disrespectful to like leave the light on. Like you should respectfully send it away. But then in other parts of India, it's disrespectful to smother the fire. So there are different customs as to what you do with the fire. Do you just let it die down? That would be nice. Give it its full lifespan, as opposed to like choking it and snuffing it. Or do you respectfully say, Agne tvam samudram gacha, oh fire, please leave this place. Do you do a mudra to draw the energy out of the fire? And then do you smother the fire as a ritualistic act of like visarjan? These are all questions to be asked about fire and fire, the reverence around fire. But notice, fire is not a thing to be used. It's a deity to be worshipped and worked with. Similarly, Shakti cannot be the product of samyukti. And so this is actually remarkable, as Harshadaji and Harishji were pointing out earlier. It's remarkable because it means that spiritual practice is ultimately futile. There's nothing that you will accomplish through spiritual practice because, it's not something that can be caused. Grace is not it's not like something you can operate like you would a machine. If that's the case, then spiritual practices are an expression of spirituality, not a means to attain spirituality. So then Shakti is productive of Yukti. Yukti is not productive of Shakti. But then Harshadaji was just making a good point too about the Guru and about Sadhu Sangha. And so if there's anything I can do at all, it's just to go close to that where there is spirituality. Yeah, and you could say like, it's already there. It's a matter of removing hindrances. So that's why the dukkha nivritti idea is interesting. Because if it's a nivritti, if it's removing something, then maybe what it does is it reveals something that was always there but that was covered over. That's certainly like better than the utpatti idea, the idea of like arising. Be that as it may though, Sri Ramakrishna would talk about sadhu sangha and he would talk about the guru. And, his claim is very simple. If you just go near holy people, if you go near the guru and the guru's community, and by the way, that could be a book also. It doesn't have to be like actual human beings. Ideally it is. There's something you can learn from being with people that you cannot learn anywhere else. But even if you just spend time with Swami Vivekananda, complete works of Swamiji or something, if you spend time with the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, if you read spiritual literature, if you listen to spiritual music, that would also be association with the holy. Sadhu Sangha. That's how Vivekananda defines it. Sri Ramakrishna seems to have a more literal view in mind. He says if you love God, you yourself will seek out the lovers of God. He would say if you want to be an Ayurvedic physician, you need to move with physicians. Only then you will learn to like take the pulse or something like that. You can't just learn on your own. You have to be with the people. And by the way, when you hang out with sadhus, you get a whole different idea as to like what it is to be spiritual actually. It blows your mind. It's so different, as in that talk Harsha that he was pointing out, so different from like the Western consumer capitalist idea of spirituality when you hang out with like actual Indian sadhus. So arguably, like that's what Sri Ramakrishna has in mind, but Swamiji, as he often does, he expands the view to include just ideas that are spiritually rewarding. Which reminds me of like my favorite movie ever. I was comparing Penny Lane coats with somebody yesterday. We're trying to decide which one of us was more of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. So Penny Lane is the character from Almost Famous, one of my favorite films. And she picks him up from the airport, Cameron Crowe's character. She picks him up from the airport and they're having this like really heartfelt discussion. And she says to him, if you ever get lonely, you can just go to the record store and see all your friends. That's her idea, like her brimful of Asher on the 45. Like the idea is that there's friendship for you in the record. So if you're ever lonely, especially in spiritual life, which can be very lonely at times, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is special for that reason. It's not just where you get ideas, it's where you can be with the holy people, like Rakal and the others. Yeah, you could be in Siddha Loka actually. It's a matter of just bringing your mind to that place. Like you could go to Ramakrishna Loka, Siddha Loka, just by inhabiting that thought world, which you can do right now while you're embodied. And if you're dreaming, you can dream yourself into Dakshineshwar and be there with Rakal as he's rolling on the floor in ecstasy. You can dream yourself into Balaram's house and watch Sri Ramakrishna dance with joy. Like that also is Sadhu Sangha. But notice, Sangha to be associated with, Sadhu, that which is holy and good. Whether it's like actual human beings or whether it's like a consortium of ideas, you tend to like take on those properties through maybe what we can call spiritual contagion. Just through some kind of wordless transference, you gain those qualities. Now, to come back to my fire example, the fire is inherently hot. So if I come near the fire, I will get that heat. But notice, that's only true insofar as I can stay near the fire. If I move away from the fire, I lose that heat. And that's arguably the case for these Shaivas. These schools will say that liberation is coming near Shiva. You can never be Shiva any more than you can be the fire. If you go into the fire, you'll self-immolate. And then you won't be there anymore to get those qualities. So you can't go into the fire. But you can stand next to it. And that's what liberation looks like. Standing next to God. Hanging out with God. And naturally, those who are standing on the edge of getting it on, like those who are there with God, they're like lit. That's the best place to be, standing next to the fire. It's like lit. Like Kalidasi and I were at a festival, and there was like a fire there, which we moved a few times. But a lot of people it's a desert, right? But there's something very charming about the fire. And you go and you sit near the fire, and you gain the qualities of the fire as long as you're there next to the fire. So now, it's not about utpatti, it's not about something arising in you that wasn't there before. It's about fire and its swadharma. It is naturally, innately hot. It's not going to go away. But if you go, and Eshama is giving one of my favorite words here, upa-asana, to sit near. So I like to think of sadhana as upasana, because that means all I have to do is sit near the altar. Just be with Devi, just like hang out with her, talk to her. It doesn't even require that I offer flowers or wave incense. It's enough just to be near it, or to like chant the chandi, and to be close to those ideas. Just notice, spiritual life is not so much about like your routine. It's not really about like, I practice for 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening, and then, I fuck around. It's more like exposure. It's like if I can just constantly be exposed to spiritual ideas, it doesn't really matter what form that takes. Whether that's like hanging out with like sadhus, and by sadhus I don't just mean mendicants, I mean anybody who dwells in God. Or just like reading, or just chanting, or meditating even, japa, like whatever it is, it can look like different things. The only thing that's important though, the essential like feature here in whatever form of spiritual practice you do is just you're willing to sit with it, to sit near God. Yeah, go next to it and stay next to it. Exactly. And that is in terms of upasana or sadhana, spiritual practice. But in terms of moksha, in terms of liberation, it's like permanently sitting your ass down next to the fire. And now notice, I don't have to generate heat for myself. The jiva cannot do that actually. And if the jiva could, again, it would be something that had a start time, and naturally something that also had an end time. But because the fire never started to be hot, and nor will it ever stop being hot, as long as there's a fire and as long as I'm established near it, I will also be hot. That's the view of liberation that we get actually from some Śaiva schools. And that can also be criticized. The view here is like, okay, but again, you've just passed the buck. Like you're saying that this didn't arise in you. It's there in the fire. But wait, your coming to the fire is something that started in time, no? Like you weren't at the fire, now you're at the fire. The same problem is there. If I can come to the fire, I can also leave the fire. What guarantee is there that I will stay at the fire, like that I will be established by the fire? So again, this view is rejected. And then the view that there is something to be removed is also rejected. Like there's something, it's always there, but it's covered up by something. Abhinava Gupta, in chapter 2 of the Tantra Sara, and of course also Tantra Loka, he makes this beautiful argument. He says, what can spiritual practice do for you when this is not something to be attained, it's something that you are. It's not something to be entered into. There's no praveshana, there's no entering into it, because nothing other than it exists to enter or be entered. And this is a very profound idea, actually. And more importantly, he says, it's not the kind of thing that can be veiled. What veil exists that could cover it? And I like to play this game. I like to think, okay, you're conscious. The light of awareness is illumining your experience. Now try to think a thought, any thought, that makes you less conscious. Just like try to do it. Think a thought like, I am so stupid. Or I am so old, or I am so crippled, or I am so evil, or I am a filthy sinner. Look, none of those thoughts can harm you. You know how sometimes in some spiritual traditions you're like, oh my God, don't talk to yourself like that. Don't give yourself negative self-talk. I couldn't care less what you say or what you think, because that never has the power to veil consciousness. Notice, even if I think I am stupid, I am sick, I am feeble, I am a filthy sinner, what can that actually do? Does that make me less conscious? I mean, just like think of something bad, like in your mind, if you can, think of a thought that is disempowering, a thought that you consider to be bad. Now think it. And just notice what it's done. Has it diminished consciousness in any which way? It might come with a certain emotional texture. If you think a thought that is quote unquote good or empowering, you will feel better. You'll feel strong and empowered. And that's valuable. And that is to be cultivated, no doubt. But on another level, just notice, even if I think a thought that is disempowering, something that makes me feel bad, nothing will happen, right? I can think I am crazy or I am sane. But there's no point at which a thought has the power to obscure awareness. I'm just as aware before the thought as I am after the thought, as I am during the thought. This is a profound idea that no veil exists to cover consciousness. If that is true, then what can spiritual practice do? What, to attain something? No, I already am that which I'm trying to attain. To enter into something? What, like nothing other than it exists to enter or be entered. To remove a veil? What veil exists that could cover the luminosity of consciousness? So Abhinava's claim in chapter 2 of the Tantra Sara is that for one who has this insight, spiritual practice is rendered useless. And importantly, it's like he uses a metaphor. He says, does the pot illumine the sun? It's laughable to think that the pot, the gata, can illumine the sun. It's the sun that illumines the pot. Similarly, all spiritual practices that you do, whether it's Anava Upaya or Shakta Upaya, or even some of the subtler Shambhava Upaya things in the Vijnana Bhairava, what can it do for you? It is but a pot. It is part of your experience. It's being illumined by consciousness. So that realization is what comes through grace, Abhinava Gupta says. It's like Lord Shiva turning away from his sankocha, his contraction, and opening up to his all-pervasive reality as consciousness, which we can recognize here and now. So then comes the final view, I think the view that the author of this text wants to put forth, and that's the pratyabhigya view, the recognition view. So abheda akhyati, Somananda will say, non-recognition of non-duality. If there is a veil, it is a conscious willingness to forget or to obscure, not in any actual or real way, just in this like, I don't know, how do you put it, like provisional or empirical way, Vyavahara way, that I'm not Shiva. That is the only thing. Like, I'm not recognizing I'm Shiva. The only reason I'm saying I'm not Shiva is not because of an actual veil or a lack of being close to Shiva or a lack of something arising in me or a lack of like cessation of suffering. The only reason I'm saying I'm not Shiva is because I fail to recognize that I am Shiva. And so here we get, I think, one of the most profound references to a story, the, what is it, the Linga Abhigyan, Shakuntala's ring. It's a famous story. I told it to you during Shivaratri time. I won't tell the whole story again. But basically there's this woman who falls in love with this prince, and then Durvasas, the angry sage, curses her and says the prince will forget all about you. But if you show him this ring, then he will remember. So chaos ensues. She drops the ring in the river and a fish eats it, and there's a whole Leela here. Asha, it's good to see you. And so then it's like, oh, your poetry book? Fuck, that was the best new moon, Rahu Mars conjunct present ever. Like, what an auspicious time for it to come out. You guys haven't read it, like, fuck. It's good. So I won't bore you with the details of the story, but more or less it goes like this. She's standing in front of the king, you know, and the king is seeing her, having an experience of her, but not recognizing who she is. Until he sees the ring, he won't recognize her. So it's not that I'm not Shiva. It's not that I'm not seeing Shiva. It's that although it's like presenting itself to me, this fact, this recognition, I just don't recognize it. Akyati, it's not the same as avidya or agyana. It's something special. It's a technical term in Shaivism. Abheda akyati. I don't know the name for it. I don't know what to call it, and therefore I can't recognize it. Kyati, akyati, without recognition or without naming. And abheda means non-dual. So non-naming, non-duality, I guess, if you want a direct English translation. It's like, I don't have a name for this. I don't have a word for this, arguably. I don't have the mantra for it, the vidya, the knowledge. So I don't see it even if it's there. Once I see it though, I realize I was always looking at it. It's not something that arose. It's not something that transferred onto me by virtue of me coming near it. It's not even something that was revealed through the removal of a veil. It's just something that always is, always was, always will be. And now for the first time in my life, I can recognize it. And that's what these teachings are supposed to do. A single word is enough. Just pointing is enough. Just one like reference. Tattvamasi Shvetaketu. And then comes this pratyabhigya. So notice, when you look at something like the moksha karaka, the stanzas on liberation, what you're getting is a comparative inquiry into different models of liberation and this discussion as to which one is most desirable. So in Christianity, you have the same discussion. In Buddhism, you have the discussion. In all the Śaiva schools, you have that discussion. Across the board, there's this very important conversation that we have to have together, and it's this. What does liberation look like? What is it going to feel like for me to be free? What's going to change? I think that's a better question. In fact, if you want, this could be like a study question or like a prompt. Maybe later in the Q&A, if you're interested, we could have this discussion and you could just volunteer some answers. What do you expect to happen? You know, as a result of doing all of this, hearing these talks and practicing sadhana, like you're doing japa, some of you are doing very intense purusharnas, 100 malas a day for Navaratri. Like, what the fuck? Like, what's that for? What's going to happen, actually? What do you think is going to happen as a result of all of these practices? This is a conversation that we have had as a tradition over the course of many classical texts, like the Moksha Karaka. But it's a conversation that arguably we need to have with ourselves and maybe with each other as a Sangha. Like, what are we trying to accomplish here? And can it be given? Because, you know, over the years, you've noticed some people have come into this space and they've been horrifically disappointed. They've stormed out because they haven't gotten what they thought was promised in this space. But that makes me ask, what do you think you're going to get? Like, what is your expectation? Like, what are you coming in looking for. And maybe we don't really even know. Sometimes we come in and we just have this like general sense of attraction to all of these things, and then we get in and we're like, actually I just wanted a boyfriend or something, you know, like actually I just wanted like money, or actually I just wanted power, I just wanted bliss. Like that conversation is very important to have internally, because then we can come up with sankalpa. Yeah, we want exactly. There's something that we get. There's like a joy, there's a presence, and we feel it in proximity. So arguably sadhu sangha, you know, that's what we're looking for. Which brings me to another important point. There's like a way to understand the lectures also, because some would say, okay, there's no point to this, there's no like topic, there's no conclusion, we're just like kind of meandering and saying a bunch of stuff about a bunch of different things. Like, what's that all about? Like, what does it lead to? And I was just speaking to Amanda the other day. We were laughing about that, about how like at the end of the day, it's like, if that's the point, if we can say something in 45 minutes or an hour, that's good. But maybe we should offer a disclaimer at the beginning that like that's not the point. The point of getting together and talking about these ideas is to marinate our minds in that, which maybe even goes like beyond words. And so we don't need to have a point, as it were. But there is a point to that. The point is just to be near the fire. Exactly. Right. So what is a conversation about God? Because what do we know of God? And why would we converse about that which we know nothing about? That's why sometimes in some sankalpa context, when you're articulating a sankalpa, you would say something like, Me manaha shivam sankalpam astu. May my manas, my mind, may manaha shivam sankalpam astu. May be Shiva, auspicious, my sankalpa. But it doesn't actually specify what that sankalpa is. May I know that which is auspicious, and may I aspire for that which is auspicious. But it leaves the Shiva kind of ambiguous here. It's just, it's up to God what that looks like. Not really up to me. So notice, I think some of the most fascinating conversations we could have pertain to soteriology. To like what it would look like to be free, and what freedom would feel like. What's the quality of liberation? That's called soteriology. And so I was telling you last night that most schools of Indian philosophy, arguably most schools of spirituality, this is the central discussion. But you cannot have this discussion until you first have a metaphysical discussion. So if I'm going to set up a hierarchy of philosophical like discussions, I would say soteriology is maybe the most important thing, but it is only possible once you have a metaphysic. You know, I was in an Uber and I was discussing Christianity with a very devout and wonderful Uber driver. And I was kind of like shocked because there was so little metaphysic that he seemed to be interested in. You know, like we had this discussion, like how could God be separate from the world if God is infinite? Wouldn't the existence of the world as an objective, independent something or other be itself a negation of God's infinity? And that was the first time he had thought of something like that. And it really disturbed him, actually, because it's important for the world to be separate from God. But it's also important for God to be infinite. Yeah, don't metaphysic and drive. It's happened a lot, actually, where like we just get lost and I don't get to work on time because we're metaphysicking and driving. But these questions like what is the nature of the soul, and is it different from God? And these are metaphysical questions. What is the nature of the soul? What is the nature of God? Which I guess you could say is a theological question. But more importantly, what is the status of the world? Is it real? Or is it a dream? Is it a superimposition onto something real? Or maybe there's nothing real that you can speak of at all, as per the Buddhist claim. Is there a real rope that is appearing to me in my ignorance as a false snake? Or why even talk about a rope? I don't even know if there's a rope, the Buddhist would say. So this question of what is the world, is it real, and is it valuable is important. Because, you know, notice, it's tied up with our soteriology. If I tell you that the world is real, that's important because then I'm saying it's worth engaging with. If you see a shimmering in the distance and you think it's an oasis in the middle of the desert, I'm actually in the middle of the desert, and you see that oasis and you know it to be nothing but a mirage, you then won't engage with it. You're thirsty, you're in the desert, and you see a shimmering, knowing that it's unreal will inform your action. So the cognition of the mirage, like the sense perception of a shimmering in a distance, coupled with the cognition that this is in fact a mirage, it will determine what you do next. And so you won't go there. But if you knew it was real, if I told you, oh, that mirage is not a mirage actually, it's a real body of water and it's very sweet, so go there and drink. That will again inform your actions. Then you will go and drink the water. So jnana and kriya, knowledge and action, go together. We act upon what we know, and knowing itself is a kind of action. So if we want aligned action, we need aligned thought. That's why we spend a lot of time talking and discussing and thinking, because we don't think it's valuable to like start moving until we know what's worth moving towards. So this samyak drishti, this right view, is the most important thing to establish for two reasons. One, because it will inform how you live your spiritual life and what you do next. What to say of spiritual life, like how you live your life, right? But secondly, because we say, and this is so important to me, we say that all you need is the view. Like one telling of the view is enough to permanently establish you in freedom. You just need to hear the view and recognize the view. Like not even believe it. It's not about assenting to the Christ-like sacrifice at Calvary and that will give you some post-mortem liberation. It's not like that. If right now I told you that you are Shiva and that all of this is your creative self-expression, it's not about believing in that. It's about recognizing that. And the proof is in the pudding, because once the rubber hits the road, then you'll know the worth of what kind of car you're driving. Do you know what I mean? It's like a lot of people will profess to have heard the view and to know the view, but then they go out into the world and you very quickly see that they're not living the view. And to live the view is just as simple as like recognizing it. And by the way, you guys, it should be effortless. If you hear the view and then it takes effort to maintain the view, you don't have the view. Basically what you have is a vikalpa, a thought construct, which is aligned with the view, but which you don't yet fully recognize as true. And so we're playing this game of trying to like keep up the facade of being Shiva. You don't have to practice being Shiva. Like, you know that conversation we had with Adi the other day? It's like, I'm like, bro, you're Shiva. Like, what else do you, what else is it? You're Shiva. That's effortless. It's an effortless, spontaneous recognition, and the rest of your life should be informed by that. It should be effortless. You don't have to like wake up and be like, oh wait, I'm Shiva. And then in your life, you're like, somebody breaks up with you and you're like, oh wait, I forgot, I'm Shiva. No, it should be effortless. It's like, okay, this is a good metaphor. How much practice do I need to recognize my name when it is called? Like say someone somewhere says, hey, Nishant, will I have to pause and like remember my teachings? Like, what is this Nishant? Yes, Nishant is this fucker. Like, I am that fucker actually. And then I turn, I'm like, that's me. Like, I don't actually have to do any effort at all to like respond when I'm called Nishant. I'm like deep down inside habituated to being Nishant. Like that, I should know that I'm Shiva. So if like something happens in the world, let's say I'm about to die. There's a car crash or something. In that moment, it shouldn't be like an effortful recollection. Like, I'm not like, oh my God, oh, good thing I'm Shiva. Let me think about what it means to be Shiva. That will help. No, it's just like, yeah, what the fuck? Who cares? Like, it's an effortless moment of, fuck the body. This can't kill me. That should be just as natural as somebody calling my name in the party and me turning to see who it is. Do you know? So that's the proof of the view. It's like an effortless, constantly self-reinforcing recognition, which inheres in each and every moment that permanently colors your life from that point on. So therefore we say the view is important because even if it isn't recognized then and there, it will still inform what you do in spiritual life and what you do with your life. But it's doubly important because it has the potential to then and there permanently change the course of your life. So the view is important for two reasons. One, because it's a sadhana, to just hear it and recognize it. But secondly, because it informs sadhana. And notice the view is soteriologically relevant because it's a metaphysical claim. It's a claim about reality. That's the view. The view is a metaphysical, samyak drishti, the right view, is the right metaphysical orientation. What am I? I'm Shiva. What is this world? It's Shiva. And what is God? Shiva. That claim in Shaivism is a metaphysical one. So I would argue then that the best discussions on soteriology are often prefaced by discussions on metaphysics, on reality. So these should be very interesting to you. But then, like I was saying yesterday, this is very important to me. Like yesterday, I was making the point that jnana cannot occur until you first know how to use the apparatus that is the mind. And so Chaitana, and more importantly, buddhi, the intellect, the discerning faculty of the mind. That is the tool which you use to discern the view. And therefore we say nothing is more important than this. That's why like sometimes it's hard for me to teach Hatha Yoga. It's a valuable practice. I love Hatha Yoga and we should practice more Hatha Yoga certainly. But it's Abhinava Upaya, you know, and a lot of times like puja, like doing ritual worship, which I tend to do a lot of, or homa, like doing fire rituals, or Hatha Yoga. When people ask me questions about Abhinava Upaya, notice I'm almost always going to like evade. I'm not interested in teaching you how to do a posture or how to do like a homa or something. Notice that wouldn't help you. That would just be like a cultural project, you know. It would be cool, it would be fun, but lots of things are cool and fun. I would recommend drugs instead. You know, I feel like drugs are way more fun sometimes. Not always, but if you want fun, if you want a good time, there are like other ways to get that. And so if you want spirituality though, I would argue that like Abhinava Upaya is great. It's worth being taught. But in our Śaiva non-dual world, it's like almost hierarchically sidelined in favor of something else. Sattarka. Sattarka means reasoning, which uses the buddhi, and we call this the uttama sadhana, the supreme sadhana, the upayotama, the supreme means. Arguably the most important and powerful spiritual practice is to discern with your intellect the true nature of things. So buddhi, remember, is the highest expression of the embodied individual. It's like in the terms of Sankhya, it's like kind of up there, right after Mahat, right after Prakriti actually is buddhi. It's the first emanation of Prakriti. Everything else proceeds from buddhi. So the 5 organs of perception, the 5 organs of action, they all come from buddhi. So if you're trying to address your spiritual problems on the level of the body and mind, and you leave the buddhi unaddressed, all of your like efforts will be superficial at best, we argue. Because it'd be like putting a band-aid on this like open wound, when really you should be cauterizing that shit. You know, you should be like working on a deeper level that prevents even the symptoms from expressing itself. So what we do is we try to address the symptoms. It's like, to give another metaphor here, it's like the whack-a-mole machine. So much of spiritual life is like the moles are coming out of the holes, and we're trying to be holy by whacking the moles as they come out. Meaning, puja, homa, japa, purasharana. Like, you could laugh at this because it'll just keep coming. Like, it'll just one mole after another. Like, the yukti will never give you shakti. Spiritual practice will never help you. What a profound idea. That spiritual practice is only like solving the symptoms. It's just a project of reifying this construct called the jiva. So the real spiritual practice, not to say the real as in better, but I am more or less saying that now because I'm in that mood. Arguably the real spiritual practice is sattarka, is reasoning. Yeah, and buddhi is such a profound word, as Harshadaji is pointing out here. It's so hard to translate. In the Bhasa Malayu, in the Malay language, buddhi is the same as culture. Buddhaya. Buddhaya means to be cultured. So buddhi then can be translated as intuition, insight, imagination, creative expression, of course, logic, analysis, intellect, all of those things go together. But it's something that happens so internally that the body doesn't even need to like move. The mind doesn't even need to move. You don't have to visualize like a deity with arms or something like that. It's enough for the buddhi to be established in the view. Perception, but it's like a deep perception. It's pratyaksha on the deepest level that doesn't even require the mediation of the senses. That's why Shankara will say it's a kind of experiential knowledge, but not the experience that is generated by the 5 senses, nor even an experience that is generated by the imaginative mind. It's called, according to Sri Shankara, aparokshana bhuti. Aparokshana bhuti means like non-a, para, aksha, anubhuti. Non-mediated experience, or an experience not through others' eyes. And by the way, this means the 5 senses also. That too is like an other to me, as we've just established. And even my mind is an other to me. So it's not really that. It's a non-other experience, which means an immediate experience that happens on the level of the buddhi. So this tarka is the uttamaha, the supreme tool. And that's what chapters 2 and 3 are all about in the Tantra Loka and the Tantra Sara. And it's important that Abhinava Gupta starts with these chapters, because arguably everything else in that book, and you know, after chapter 15, it's all just pure rituals, because the Tantra Loka is first and foremost, I would argue, a padati, a ritual manual. Everything after that is rendered either redundant, I actually don't think so, but it's rendered an expression. It's yukti coming from shakti, to use Harshadaji's beautiful phrase. He's referencing his Guru Parampara, Siddha Yoga lineage, is referencing Baba Nityanandaji of Ganesh Puri. So the claim here is that like, if I do spiritual practices, it's just for fun. Just for shits and giggles, you know. So everything after chapter 2 and 3 is an expression of ideally what I recognize on the level of buddhi in chapter 2 and 3. But this buddhi is nourished by conversations like this, by metaphysical inquiry. So I think that's it. Like the whole Hindu or Sanatana Dharma world, the whole Buddhist world, it's really just this. You go near a teacher and the teacher tells you something. And what else is there? Like you just hear what the teacher tells you, and more importantly, you recognize it as true, and then you're free. So this is sattarka, reasoning on the level of buddhi. So texts like the bhoga karika, moksha karika, tantra sara, texts like the pratyabhigya hridaya sutra, otherwise known as the Shakti Sutra, or the Shiva Sutra, both from Panini, the Maheshwara Sutra, the first 14 verses of Ashtadhyayi, also the Shiva Sutra of Vasugupta. Like, these are all just wisdom teachings. They can be very aphoristic and mystical, but they then are explained. The teacher then will like walk you through what this verse means or various possible meanings, and then you just think about it. But this is my point. To use the intellect to think about this stuff, you need to first learn how to think. So therefore, we introduce a third category. There's soteriology, the conversation about freedom. The second category, which is metaphysic, the conversation about reality, which, after all, will set you free. The truth will set you free. You know the Bring Me the Horizon song? The truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. Then there is, arguably, even more prior to that, epistemology. Epistemology is the conversation of how do I know what I know, what makes something true, and how do I think, really. So we have a word for this, it's just nyaya. Nyaya means logic or reasoning. And it's a very like diverse spiritual tradition. There are like different nyayika masters. But it's important to me, and it's important that you know, that many of these nyayikas, these early logicians, were also Shaivas. But importantly, they lived in the smashan. Like we know from our records that like people like Akshapada, they would apply the bhasma, and they probably moved about in like this group of early Atimargins or Shaiva ascetic kind of communities. They were like desert fathers, you know. But it's also important that some of these great logicians were commentators of early Shaiva texts, like the Pashupata Sutra. One of the main commentators, his name is Kaundinya. He's a logician, actually. He's composed works on Indian logic. Which is really interesting because when you think of these Aghori types, when you think of the Shaiva sitting in the smashan covered in ash, the idea of the intellectual doesn't really strike you. You know, they're eating like whatever. They're eating all sorts of like random things, and they're living in a way that seems really uncouth. But their tradition is actually very intellectually rigorous. Learning Nyaya is one of the first things you do as a Shaiva. You learn how to think, you learn how to reason, you learn how to debate. And so epistemology precedes metaphysic, which precedes soteriology. These are the three categories that I introduced yesterday. And it's important, I think, when you're interacting with these materials, with classical Sanskrit texts and the ideas that come from them, to be clear as to what category you're interacting with. You know, like what is the discussion and what does it pertain to? Is this a metaphysical inquiry? If so, what's the link between this metaphysical speculation and soteriology? Is it just speculative metaphysics? If so, then why should I engage in that process? It doesn't have a soteriology. And if there's a soteriology, I have to ask myself, like, what is the metaphysical structure from which this soteriology comes? And more importantly, how do I know what I know? Like, am I thinking about this in the correct way? And then we learn terms like hetu, how to like structure a cause from an effect, and like what invariable concomitants might look like. If X, then Y. Is this a correlation? And if that correlation obtains every single time I get X, I must see Y, then maybe it's a causation. Like, these are all conversations that we ought to have, epistemologically speaking. Yeah. Yeah, right. As Harshaji is pointing out here, like this can sound very like pushing the glasses up the nose and being like, well, actually, it's a conversation that can be dominated, sometimes very patriarchal or male sort of approach. But here again, the inquiry doesn't have to be so wordy. It doesn't have to be like logical. It can be more imaginative and intuitive. And so therefore, the aphoristic way of teaching is important, where you just give these little sutras or suttas, just like sort of poetic pointers to the truth, and then you meditate upon those things. And so even the practice here is more feminine in nature because it's receptive. It's not about talking endlessly, but about hearing maybe just one thing and then sitting with that one thing until in the quiescence of meditation, in the receptivity of the womb of meditation, that truth shines. So notice, it's a profound thing to say that buddhi is at a very like high place in this tradition. It's in a very refined spot. And epistemology is the refinement of the buddhi in order to be able to participate in a metaphysical discussion, which is inherently salvific. It will inherently give you freedom. So Sri Ramakrishna in many places would say bondage or liberation is in the mind only. He's almost saying like it's in the buddhi only. It's about whether your intellect is aligned with reality or not. And so a lot of people sit and meditate, but they just like watch the mind. Who gives a fuck? Like, what will you get from just like watching the mind if there's no intellectual realization, if there's no insight there? So the word vipassana means more than just mindfulness. Mindfulness to me is just like, it's like abjectly stupid. It's like looking at something, and that could be smart, but it's not with any active inquiry into what that thing is. It's just like staring at it and passively hoping that it will reveal something to you. Some people get lucky. Some idiots stare at a wall long enough and the wall tells them the truth, But arguably, like when you do that, it's lazy. It's lazy and it very easily becomes soporific. We say, no, as long as I'm endowed with faculties, why should I sit and vegetate in front of a wall? If I'm looking at a wall, let me actively inquire into the very reality of the wall. That's an active, dynamic process. And so we call this Shakta Upaya, the way of Shakti. It is an inquiry, it is spontaneous, dynamic, and very deep. Shakta Upaya. So Anava Upaya, Shakta Upaya, Shambhava Upaya, we don't need to get into these words now, you already know these words. But they pertain to these epistemological, metaphysical, soteriological discussions. But last night, I introduced another category, and it's a very important category. It's called aesthetics. And nowadays, in the Western philosophical context, it's included in a broader discipline called axiology. And so axiology is the study of things like ethics, but also importantly, value theory. Like what makes something valuable, and also what makes something beautiful. Right? Like what makes this is anupaya, exactly. This whole context for this conversation, at least according to Abhinava Gupta, is anupaya, the no means. Because when Abhinava Gupta is explaining anupaya, he says, what can any upaya or yukti or yoga do for you when there's nothing to attain? You already are that which you are trying to attain. Also, there's nothing other than this to enter into or be entered. And more importantly, there's no veil other than this that exists to veil it. As such, what could any upaya do for you? It's called anupaya. And it's through grace, a spontaneous piercing of grace, shaktipata, that one comes to this recognition. Having said all of that though, Abhinava expresses his soteriology in these aesthetic terms. So I should mention that like ethics, they're important. I don't really care about ethics actually, because to me metaphysics is more important. My ethics will be informed by what I think I am and what I think the world is. So how I treat you will be determined by my metaphysic. If I know for a fact that I am you, that will be the only ethics I need. Because if I can just selfishly do what I've always done in the past, with this new metaphysical view, I will be a perfectly ethical being. Because I only ever do things that I want to have happen to me, to myself. And therefore, if I know that you are me, then I will treat you the way that I treat myself. This is the metaphysical foundation of ethics that we get uniquely from non-duality. In Western ethics, it's called is-ought fallacy. You can't derive an ought from an is. Just because something is a certain way doesn't mean it ought to be that way. The ought, what ought I do and what ought I not do? These are all conversations that arguably in the Western tradition are supposed to be separate from conversations about metaphysics. But we say, no, that's ridiculous. Like, it's not until I understand what I am and what this world is that I can engage in this conversation about what I ought to do here. And that's why you'll see in like the Greek tradition, which is the early Western tradition, the book like Ethics, Nicomachean Ethics. The word ethics there is used actually in relation to metaphysics. Like first Aristotle has to ask, what the fuck is a human being? And it's only when he realizes through this inquiry that we are like featherless bipeds, that we are like pleased through contemplation, is he able then to articulate this like goal of life called eudaimonia. The goal of life is to attain eudaimonia, the Greek word for say moksha or nirvana, but that eudaimonia is in dialogue with this like categorical conversation he wants to have about what it is to be a human. So once I know that a human is a featherless biped who delights in contemplation, once I know that the most happiness I can get in this world is through contemplation, then I can have an ethics. Oh my god, what is this, G? Fuck yeah, is this chai? Oh my god. Look at this. It's okay, I have my own chai. Chai ma.
Yeah, secret ingredient.
Secret ingredient. Okay, so breakfast of champions, Kalidasi calls it.
Fuck yeah.
Arizona iced tea.
That's the real Arizona iced tea, not that shit you buy at Circle K.
So, notice eudaimonia, the goal of a human life, is contextualized by a conversation on what it is to be human and what the world is. So we say metaphysically, that conversation is prior to an axiological conversation about ethics. But axiology is more than just ethics, it's also about value. I like to talk about money. Money is important because what Sri Ramakrishna does is he divests money of its value when he like stands on the banks of the river and holds clay in one hand and holds money in the other, and he's like throwing the clay and throwing the money into the river, and he's saying to himself, clay is money and money is clay, rupee is clay, clay is rupee. It's very cute because then he's like, oh wait, did I just offend Mother Lakshmi? Which is important. Notice he's saying money is not the symbol. It's the energy which we call Lakshmi, and that is to be loved and cherished and respected. But the conversation I think we should have is, to what extent do the numbers on my screen reflect that energy in the world called Lakshmi? And actually, arguably, it doesn't. It doesn't necessarily represent that energy at all. Like abundance, luxury, these things are not necessarily linked to like numbers on a screen. So for example, yesterday I'm at this Thai restaurant and we're having this conversation. Basically, I ordered everything on the appetizer menu and pretty much also on the entree menu. We just went ham. And then I was like, we didn't get any ham, but we got pretty much everything at this Michelin Thai restaurant. And then we were just having this conversation of like, this could be money, that's numbers on the screen, or it could be a fragrant papaya salad in front of you. Like, what is the relationship between money as a symbol and that thing arguably that came through the spending of that symbol? And you know, if you've ever spent time around like ravers or drug dealers or something like that, you realize that money is not the only currency. There's lots of different like transactions. There's a kind of kindness and abundance that sometimes comes. It's like a whole different conversation. But notice it's an axiological conversation because it's a conversation about value. Like, is money really valuable? Insofar as it can get like all the appetizers on the menu, maybe that's valuable. But then what's the point if there aren't people to enjoy that with? And what's the point if while you're like eating that Thai food, you're not in a state of joy and happiness? Like, what if you're stressed out about work? It's through work that you get the money. And for the Thai food appetizer menu, you have the money. But then the appetizers appear and they're like in front of you, but you're not able to enjoy them because you're thinking about the work that is stressing you out. So these are important conversations. And what Sri Ramakrishna is saying is that like at most, money will be able to meet physical needs, like giving you a place to stay or giving you clothes or giving you food. But do you really need the best versions of those things? Like, is a mansion going to shelter you better than a one-bedroom apartment? Is a Michelin star like Thai restaurant necessarily going to like nourish you more than a grocery run at like a cheaper grocery store? Like, what kind of clothes do you really need, and how many of them do you really need? And if we're just going to be honest, materialist, we realize that our threshold for shelter, for clothing, and for food is actually quite low. Yesterday we were fasting, because Navaratri we were fasting, so we were especially able to eat everything on that Thai food menu. But if we had lunch or if we had breakfast, then even if I were to order everything on that menu, that's what we were reflecting about yesterday, I wouldn't be able to eat all of it actually. Just like a little bit would be enough. So do I really actually need that amount of money? Because I don't really actually need that amount of food. And do I really need that amount of money? Because I don't actually need that size of home. And do I really need that amount of money? Because I don't need that many clothes. Just one pair that I can like, or two pairs that I can just like wear again and again and again is enough for me. You could come to this conclusion, and Sri Ramakrishna is trying to teach that when he's throwing the clay and the rupee into the river. He's like, well, the money is for the clay. Here's the clay and here's the money. But now he's realizing that they're either equal and equally not that important to him. So conversations about value, what we find valuable, that's important. Because if you knew that money wasn't in and of itself valuable, that would change your relationship to work, it would change your relationship to time, all of that. But arguably we said yesterday that axiology is ultimately going to be a study of beauty. The thing of beauty is a joy forever. So something that's beautiful will be valuable. Hence the gold standard. We consider like money to be related to how much gold a nation has or something. But like, because gold is inherently beautiful, you could argue. There's something about gold that a person finds beautiful and therefore valuable. So if we know that something is beautiful, if we can perceive the beauty in it, we will value it. And notice then, if somebody is able to see more beauty in the world, the quotient of joy that they're going to experience is naturally going to be proportional to how much beauty they can see in the world. So if everyone is beautiful, if everything is beautiful, then they'll perpetually be happy. I think of beauty as a joy forever. And so what Keats is doing in that poem, the Ode to Aggression Urn or whatever, he's doing something that's very like Śaiva in nature. He's equating beauty to truth. He says beauty is truth and truth is beauty. Then he's equating beauty and truth to joy and meaning, which Christ does too when he says the truth will set you free. So if you're free, that's valuable. You'll be happy and joyful because freedom is synonymous with joy. But how are you free? When you know the truth. But what is the truth? That which is beautiful. So now you get this profoundly liberating aesthetic theory that tells you that God can be pursued through the beautiful. So now it includes artists. If you think of a scientist as one who is inquiring for truth, there's something very poetic and beautiful about that. And there's something very scientific and methodical about an artist. There's a kind of like precision to the artist's quest. So you can see truth and beauty kind of melting together. But now you have a metaphysic, an epistemology, and a soteriology, this threefold trident, that's premised upon an aesthetic theory, a theory of beauty. And yes, Eshama is right to point out here, the Saundarya Lahari, the arising, the wave of beauty, Saundarya. Nothing could be more important than the beautiful. You know? The pursuit of beauty is inherently spiritualizing. And that's going to be huge, right? Yeah, exactly. And Keats also has that, right? Like he has this like rasa theory, where he was a very like sad, anemic British poet sitting under trees thinking of Greek myths, right? Like, and also, you know, he had this Shaktipata moment, I think, like in the story. Keats is my favorite of the romantic poets, but I remember hearing that he was first training to be a doctor, a surgeon or something, like every, you know, like the Indian son my parents wish they had. So this young Keats is in medical school, and allegedly they're like dissecting a person, like they're performing a surgery. And I think back then you would just like bite on something and they would just make an incision and do the surgery. They didn't really have nitrous oxide. They didn't really have gas. And so a lot of times you just like cut the body open and so it's very painful, right? And Keats is there in the audience and he's watching this process occur. He's watching someone get cut open and he's watching the surgery, and then he feels himself to be in the body of that person who's being cut open. He like for a moment doesn't remember that he's Keats standing over there as a student observing the surgery. He feels the pain as if it's his own pain. So it's like an empath moment. And so this is like a Śaiva realization that I'm not just this body, I am all the bodies. And what's happening to that body is happening to this body. It's like compersion, but like in this case, he's experiencing the pain of the surgery. And then he passes out. And when he comes to, he gives up the medical profession and decides to be a poet. And so many of his reflections, alone in the woods, sitting under the trees, like thinking of Grecian urns and whatnot, they're very like Śaiva in his recognition. He's a poet, you know, he's using beauty and art as a means into truth. And what he's realized is that if you just stay with what's beautiful, if you savor what's beautiful, like whether it's like a kiss or whether it's chocolate cake or whether it's the breeze brushing your face in the desert, arid desert air, like whatever the case may be, whatever thrills you, whatever is beautiful, move towards that. And notice, that's a natural, spontaneous inclination anyway. So what we're going to say now, and this is like stunning and really, really, really controversial for obvious reasons, is that you will do best by moving in the path that feels most natural and spontaneously right for you, which a lot of times will come off as just hedonism. Because you're naturally going to want to do what's like nice, right? And our claim is that if you just follow that, you're going to be okay. Because even if it's like, I don't know, like say you're huffing nitrous all day or something, if you get to the point where that's no longer like nourishing for you, that will naturally, spontaneously occur to you. You know, like you'll just like feel like, I don't want to do it anymore. And then you'll have a new vice or something. And then from that, you'll have a new thing, and then a new thing, and a new thing, and slowly it leads you to God. So we say then, this is the sukh upaya. Sukha, joy or easefulness or naturalness even, sahaja. Upaya means way. So sahajopaya or sukh upaya are also terms that are used to describe the tradition. Just the natural path, the easy path, going with what feels right and natural and spontaneously good. Which arguably, if taken to its logical conclusion, is called swadharma. Swadharma is doing what it is your nature to do, what it is in your heart to do. And for Arjuna, that's fighting on the battlefield, on Kurukshetra. For you, it could be writing a novel, it could be traveling to a particular place, or it could be going down the street to the smoke shop and getting a can of European gas. You know, like whatever it looks like in that moment is what you should do. That's the pursuit of beauty. Yeah, right, like coming to a lecture, like standing near the fire, whatever that fire looks like. So when you have a taste for the spiritual, Like when you like puja, when you like homa, and you spontaneously seek out settings in which a puja is being performed or homa is being performed, when you of your own accord, motivated by your own free will, go to a lecture to hear spiritual ideas, arguably you're only doing that because you like it. You know, like there's any number of things that you could otherwise be doing right now with your time. You could be at the mall. You could be watching a movie at the AMC theaters or something like that, which I love to do. Or you could be, I don't know, at a board game bar like we were at yesterday playing chess. It was so cute, actually. Somebody was teaching chess yesterday, so we had a really nice like theological discussion about like Magnus Carlsen and skeptical theism and how that like can be explained by a great chess player whose moves seem preposterous in the beginning, but in the long run like all make sense. We had a great conversation. And there was a guy there. He looked really intelligent, actually. And he was like being taught chess by this girl. And I was like, I hope you guys aren't betting any money, because I think this guy is fooling you. He looks like he knows chess. He looks like he's feigning ignorance right now. This looks like a hustle, because he was like just kind of like, tell me what the bishop does. Yeah, I was like, nah, bro, I think this guy knows how to play chess. And then they were like, can you play chess? And I'm like, yes, but like not in the... I mean, I know Sicilian defense and whatnot, but like that's about it. And I'm like, you know, Indians... We were good at we invented this fucking game, and then like the Russians got so good at it that we were just like, no, but right now, right, the best chess player is Indian. I think we're getting our groove back. You know, kings used to settle their disputes over a chessboard, and then when we realized the Mongols weren't going to play that game, we just like stopped practicing. It's a very Kshatriya game. Anyway, and so too is snake and ladders. Right. Gambling is one of the 64 arts. It's an art, something you can learn actually. Yeah. So okay, I digress. What is all of this but a digression? But if something is beautiful, it has value. You know, so therefore we say there's an axiological, more importantly, there's an aesthetic claim that we get in Shaivism. And therefore I think this translates to the maximal art that we get in our temples, the inclusion of dance and music and poetry as like part of the puja, the use of like smells and bells and flowers and everything that like inspires a sense of beauty that's brought into spiritual life. So now being good at a musical instrument and being able to sing is a sadhana. Like you'll see Abhinava Gupta, his portrait that Madhuraja paints, includes an ektara or a veena. He's like playing an instrument. It's important that Abhinava Gupta is not only musically proficient, but he's also proficient at what is arguably the most sophisticated, refined, and challenging instrument. So one thing you could do to practice Shaivism is to learn an art, to learn the flute, or to learn guitar, or veena, or sitar. It's to learn to like write poetry. If you like write suicide poems, like you were saying, right? Like if you write poetry, like you should keep writing poetry. That act of producing poems or the act of writing music or engaging in a musical setting, that's spiritual because it's beautiful. It's art. It's poetic. It's meaningful. It's sacred. So this aesthetic conversation is what I wanted to have with you yesterday because it was Ugadi, the Telugu New Year. And yesterday we drank Srija's mom, Srija Devi's mom made this like the beverage. There's a beverage that you drink on Ugadi, and it's like the Shad Rasa, you know, the 6 tastes. So there's like the mango for sweetness, there's the neem for bitterness, there's some tamarind for the sour flavors, there's the jaggery is for sweetness, I think. There's jaggery. There's like all sorts of different flavors, and they're all mixed together, and you drink that together with everyone. It's like you're cheersing the new year, and you're saying whatever flavors might come in this new year, have at it, ma. I want to taste them all. And you drink this in the very like Bhairavatva kind of way. You're saying, I will taste everything. There is nothing I will not eat. There is nothing I will not drink. There is nothing I will not see. You know, I will taste it all. For all of them are nourishing to me. I, the Bhairava, the fire of consciousness that can consume any wood that you put into me. Okay, wait. Wow. I could have articulated that better. Whoops. Now.
That's the whole tradition.
The whole tradition. Okay, you guys. So we got this idea of like aesthetic theory or axiology, the theory of meaning and value and sacredness, more importantly, the theory of beauty, the rasa vada. And that is an important part of the metaphysic, which is an important part of the soteriology. And this whole discussion takes place in the epistemic context of Nyaya. So what we use are texts like the Paramārthasāra, but more importantly, what we use are texts like the Bhagavad Gītā, like the Upanishads, and of course, because it's Navaratri, importantly, we use texts like the Chandi. So now I'm going to pivot and come to the Chandi. The Chandi is important for aesthetic reasons. It's beautiful. There's aesthetic value to the story. Like there's something about a story that is meaningful. And so if you don't want to engage with the story, notice if you start your commentary in chapter 2, verse 10 or 11, you're saying that you want to engage in a metaphysical and soteriological discussion, but you don't really want to engage with a story, with a poem, with art. You know, it's like that's a choice. That's an important choice and a valid choice. Spiritual traditions are very valid when they decide to limit their discussion to one area of philosophy and omit other areas. That's perfectly valid. But what Swami Vivekananda does is he like points to the first chapter actually of the Bhagavad Gītā, and arguably it's his favorite chapter. And he thinks the most important teaching in the Gita, Swamiji's like arguably his favorite teaching was this, not the very profound metaphysical contemplation of Sankhya Yoga, nor even the very practical application in Karma Yoga. None of that. None of the meditation stuff that you're going to hear later. Swamiji thinks the most important thing that Sri Krishna says to us, we who are floundering on the battlefield of our lives, is to, motherfucker, get the fuck up and go. In other words, like, do something. That's the teaching, you know? As opposed to just like sitting there and staring at a wall and calling it sadhana. Like, do something. Go fight a war. Kill your guru if you need to. Whatever that expression and action is, it's action. That's what's important. And this is called kartritva, agency and doership. You know, so some people have complained. They're like, apparently I talk too fast or I'm excitable. And I'm like, yes, I can see where they're coming from. There's a vision or a version of spirituality where it's about like being calm and being like peaceful and being still, which is awesome and valid, right? Like that's cool too. That's like Sada Shiva. But also valid, equally valid, not more valid, but certainly not less valid, is a dynamic expression, which you see in Sri Krishna and with Sri Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So this is important because that action, that kartritva, is rooted in a kind of jnana, a kind of knowledge. And knowledge itself is inherently an action. So the dynamism of knowledge and action is rooted in a third thing called desire. So now I come to another thing. I come to desire. Yeah. And desire, icha, is arguably the most important word in our entire tradition. Somananda certainly seems to think so. Somananda's Shaivism is a Shaivism of desire. To him, jnana is an emanation of desire, and action is an emanation of jnana. So jnana shakti and kriya shakti, they're both of them rooted in the most essential shakti called icha shakti. So when you chant shakti mantras, a lot of them are going to end in like eem sounds. Whether it's plus eem, or hara as in hridaya plus eem, or kra as in kriya plus eem. So that eem sound, eem, yes, that sound, you find it in the Kama Kala Vilasa, and there we learn that this bija mantra, eem, refers to desire. So what Shakti is Icha. Shakti is Icha. So therefore we say Shiva without Icha is Shava, is a corpse. So we don't want a spirituality that is bereft or devoid of dynamism. But that dynamism is essentially, primordially, desire. So therefore, all desires are holy. Whatever you desire, whatever. It could be chocolate cake or it could be Kurukshetra. They're all like different expressions of the same thing. So this is maybe the most radical and difficult claim to understand. Because, I don't know, we have this view, and I'm not sure where it comes from, but I'm just gonna like, for fun, conjecture something. People went to school. And in school, they were taught to be quiet and sit in their seats and be obedient. But arguably, that comes from this colonial desire to create good workers. So arguably, if we take the school system as being developed from like this, like, I don't know, project for creating soldiers and for creating obedient workers, then it makes sense that you need to train people to do what is unnatural, to do what feels bad, because that's supposed to be good. Ultimately, it's bad in the beginning and good in the end. But we think, and we say, that this is weird, because how can X produce something that is categorically different from X? For instance, if I have colors, and I'm mixing the colors, will I ever get the number 4? Like, will I ever get a number from the act of mixing colors? Similarly, if I count numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I don't know why I use the ABCD, like, song for that. But if I count numbers, will I ever get purple? No, it's manifestly absurd to think that I'm going to get a color from interacting with numbers. And it's manifestly absurd to think that I'm going to get numbers from interacting with color. And that's because they are categorically different. It's a category error to say that I'm going to get colors from numbers. I'm going to get numbers from colors. Similarly, how can I get something good and pleasing and nourishing from something that is depleting and bad and painful? This is a category error. If you consider these two things to be separate, then bondage will never produce freedom. So if you practice spirituality like a slave, how will you ever be free? And that's the kind of spirituality we seem to many of us be interested in. Oh my God, look at these cups of chai. Chai ma, you guys. Chai ma. So to many people, look at this chai. This is God. That sounds like Charvaka, right? That's the thing. Like, this kind of spirituality is very scary because we're saying, drink chai and you'll realize God. That's essentially like Virochana's like mistake. He learns from Prajapati, I think. No, Brihaspati, right? He learns from Jupiter that body is God, and he leaves it at that. He's like, yes, the body is God. Indra goes deeper, and he essentially learns that the body is God, but it's not just the body. You go deeper, you get the prana. Go deeper, you get the mind. Go deeper, you get the intellect. Go deeper, you get samadhi. Go deeper, then you'll get God. This is unfortunate, but there was a conversation like this happening in a particular satsang, and I was like, I think Virochana is right. Do you know? He's not wrong. Like, what he realized that the body was God. Yes, he stopped there, but will he always be there? I don't know. I think Virochana will get a little more because he'll be with the body for as long as that's good to him, and then he will go for something more, which is what Indra does. So I don't think you can say, oh, Virochana was wrong and Indra was right. They were both right. And arguably, I would say that Nachiketa is not being tricked by Yamaraj. Anyway, I don't want to get into these discussions, but there's a whole sense in which what I'm saying can sound like Charvaka. It can sound like hedonism. And I'm sorry that I'm okay with that. Because we think Charvaka is real and true and good. It's the Bhupura. Obviously, there's more to it than just the Bhupura, but it's not wrong. It's not wrong to like chai and drink chai and enjoy chai. Because chai ma today becomes jai ma tomorrow. In fact, it's already jai ma the moment you're drinking the chai. Ma is the chai. So what I'm teaching, what I'm sharing is not new. It's just Shaivism. And arguably it's we call Kaulachara or Vamachara, but even that is not entirely fair. It's just the aesthetics of Shaivism. But in our modern context, where many of us went to school, and in school we learned that which is nice and pleasing and good is ultimately going to harm us, that arguably makes what I'm saying sound really problematic. Because I'm saying do what you want. Right? Do what comes natural to you because you're Shiva. What else will you do? So desire is holy. And any expression that desire takes, whether it's chocolate cake or Kurukshetra, whatever desire it is, the desire itself we call Shakti. Therefore, it is important that in the Devī Māhātmyam, we get two characters. So coming to the Chandi now, and I want to say a few things about the Chandi and some of the Śaiva teachings we get there. We get two characters. The first character, Surata, is interested in his kingdom. He wants to rule, he wants to have sovereignty, he wants to be in the world. And it's important that he's honest enough and shameless enough to be able to articulate that desire to the Divine Mother. Now, Dhruva in the Bhagavatam also has an experience of Bhagavan Vishnu. Here, Dhruva is doing sadhana because he wants his father's affection. I won't tell you the whole story, obviously many of you have heard it already, but Dhruva is doing spiritual practice, not because he wants to realize God, but because his heart is broken. His father has preferred his, stepbrother or something. His father prefers the new wife and has started to neglect Dhruva's mom, and by nature also Dhruva. So Dhruva is so sad, he lost his father's love, he's like a 9-year-old boy, so he goes and performs tapasya in order to get his father's love. When Bhagavan Vishnu appears before Dhruva, Dhruvaji is like, oh my God, you're so beautiful. I actually don't care anymore about the kingdom, and I don't care about my father. I don't really care about the things that I cared about when I started out. I just want you. Do you know what happens though? This is worth thinking about. It's in the Bhagavatam. What does Vishnu say to this? It's kind of shocking actually. So, okay, Vishnu appears. Bhagavan Vishnu appears as a result of Dhruvaji's insane penance. Sometimes when I'm doing sadhana, like now we're doing Purasharanas for Navaratri, if I'm like getting tired or whatever, I'm like, wait, Nish, a 9-year-old boy like did much fiercer sadhanas than this. Like, what the fuck is my problem? Stay up, do some more japa. Because he was 9. The kid was alone in the forest at age 9 doing sadhana. I mean, the things that heartbreak can do for you, right? Now, he sees Vishnu and he's like, okay, I actually am not interested in the goals that I had when I started. And Vishnu doesn't believe him, I guess. Vishnu is like, no. Here, I'm going to give you the thing that you wanted. I'm going to give you the kingdom. You will rule forever. And then once you're done here, you will become the pole star. The star that we see, that dog star, the Native Americans call it, that's Dhruva. We can see him still. He's the pole star, right? So he becomes a celestial being. But that's not what he asked for. But it's arguably what he wanted. It was in his heart. And after he does the sadhana, maybe he thinks that he doesn't want it anymore. But the Lord knows what is in your heart. That's the interesting thing, because we pray for things, and then we feel like our prayers aren't being answered when the response isn't like what we wanted. But it's only because we don't really know what we wanted. If we knew what we wanted, we would see immediately that everything that we get is exactly that thing that we wanted. And it's not so much that, oh, I'm praying to God for what I want, and therefore God gives me what I want. I am God, motherfucker. Like, I am Shiva. So naturally, what I'm going to get is going to be just what I want. Like, this whole world is appearing in me for my own sake. Do you think I'm going to, like, kill off my, like, loved ones because, like, I did that because that's what I wanted, actually. That's a weird thing to say. But it's like everything that's happening in the world right now is happening because I wanted it to happen. In a sense. In a very, like, and this is, of course, this teaching can be really difficult and problematic too, and we can discuss that in the Q&A. But I think it's important to point out here that Dhruva wanted something, and when Vishnu appeared before him, as Christ points out, the Lord knows what is in your heart, Vishnu gave him that which he truly wanted, even if that's not what he asked for upon his Ishvara Darshana. Now, Surata in the Chandi, he knows what he wants, and he does sadhana for that reason. And when Mother appears, he has no problem asking her for what he wants, and Mother has no problem giving him what he wants. So Surata here is the representation of bhoga. Bhoga is now accepted as a valid spiritual goal, and you can do spiritual practices for bhoga. So spiritual practices produce bhoga. They create good karma, they generate merit, and through that you get higher births and enjoy higher and higher pleasures, which is actually perfectly valid and perfectly good. So that's what makes the Devī Māhātmyam a tantric text, because it's willing to accept bhoga as a viable spiritual goal also. So when we look at texts like the Moksha Karika, there's also another one called the Bhoga Karika by the same author. And just as seriously as we consider models of moksha, we are also seriously considering models of bhoga, because enjoyment is arguably the goal of spiritual life. And so why then would you be against enjoyment prior to moksha when you actually want bhoga as a result of moksha? So having this cognitively dissonant view that pleasure is bad and then doing spiritual practices because you want pleasure is weird. And this Gaudiya Vaishnava girl pointed this out to me actually one time. She was like, "Can I ask you a question?" She's saying it very earnestly, you know. She was like, "When I go to the temple, they tell me that the pleasures of the world are like bad, that I shouldn't want them. But then they're telling me that if I do my duties in the world, I will go to heaven and get pleasures there. So are pleasures good or bad?" And I was like, you see the hypocrisy? On one level, they're telling you not to enjoy stuff, but the reason that you're not enjoying stuff is so that you can enjoy stuff later. But if you don't learn how to enjoy stuff now, how will you know how to enjoy it later? If you don't have like an ability to like enjoy chocolate cake now, what will you do when you get the celestial chocolate cake in the Gandharva Loka or the Pitri Loka? You know, so are you pro-pleasure or against pleasure? And if you're against pleasure, then you should be consistent. But if you say moksha, liberation, is a kind of joy, a kind of delight, a kind of bliss, then how could it be categorically different from the blisses of this world? And even if it was, then at least I have to start somewhere. You know, so being happy, being cheerful, being blissful is arguably your first responsibility. And Mother gives that. Mother is Sadananda. She's all bliss, Sadananda Mai, and therefore her gift is bliss. She's Anandada, she gives bliss. Harshada, she gives laughter. Harsha means laughter and joy. She gives that. So it's a laughing, cheerful sadhaka that is a sadhaka of the Divine Mother. A sad saint is a sad saint. A saint who is sad is a sad saint. Was it Teresa? Teresa of Avila might have said that. Anyway, now Surata, the word Surata means good chariot. Surata means like being on a good rata. Ami rata, tumi rati. You are the driver, I am the carriage. It's a euphemism. Surata means good sex. It means sex. Surata, like to be on a good carriage, is to have a good ride. So his name is literally sex, you guys. Like, it's kind of funny that's like the joke in the Chandi almost. Like there's a king whose name is Sex, who performs really great sadhana, who gets from the Divine Mother bhoga. But that's not all. There's also another character named Samadhi, who again is very fortunately named. Samadhi means his dhi, his intellect is sama, established in oneness, in sameness, in equanimity. And that's what he wants. And so when he comes to the Divine Mother, he asks for that, and the mother says, Varam Bruhi, what do you want? Okay, here, tadastu, you will have this. What can you say anyway? There's no words that could describe this type of thing. But bhoga and moksha are both given by the Divine Mother, which shows us that the application of the Chandi can be for one or the other or both. And ideally, it's both. We consider liberation to be incomplete if it doesn't cover the whole spectrum. That's why I love Vamachara, Kaulachara. I even love Abhichara. Like, because the whole reason I do teach those things or talk about those things is in the name of fullness and wholeness. I don't consider it Shaivism, which rejects any aspect of its own tradition. So what is a Shaiva who speaks out against Hatha Yoga and says that it's problematic? What is a Shaiva who speaks out against black magic, Abhichara? Just you wait when your police officers won't be able to protect you anymore, when you don't have a standing military to defend your nation, then you'll see what Abhichara means. And just you wait, if you talk about all our magic and things like that, wait till your hospitals are no longer able to deliver your babies. Then come see us by the Duni. Then we'll talk about the magic and the sorcery of our tradition. Before you criticize astrology, remember that Spartan and Athenian kings lived by it. You know, in this modern world where everyone has become so arrogant with their electricity and with their hospitals, it's easy for them to talk smack about black magic and about sorcery, but we Shaivas will maintain those traditions. We will continue to learn how to curse and how to kill. We'll continue to learn how to heal. We'll continue all of these folk practices, and then one day, you'll see who has the last laugh. Because these are the traditions that survive, not your electricity and allopathy and things like that, though those are valid and wonderful too. So having said that, it's Shaivism when it considers the whole spectrum of the lineage, the whole spectrum of the tradition, and says tadastu, like all of these are good. So that should also arguably translate to your own life. Whatever is there in your life, it's all good, and it's all part of like a bigger, more wholesome picture. And that's what the Devī Māhātmyam first and foremost will offer you. It offers you an aesthetic, beautiful story in which you encounter aesthetics like bhoga as valid as a goal as moksha. Both are aesthetically rooted. Okay, so having said that, we have Surata and Samadhi, but now I want to close with a more important point, which dovetails with the Gita actually. The first chapter of the Gita is important. It's a story, but it's a story of a guy who got his heart broken. It's a story of a depressed guy. And that's exactly how the Chandi starts too. Like the Chandi, whether Surata or Samadhi get moksha or bhoga is beside the point. Both of them actually start in the same place. One of them will get moksha, the other one will get bhoga and then eventually moksha. And by the way, the one who gets moksha also gets bhoga through moksha. But like arguably they both start off in the same place. They're betrayed, they're depressed, they're disheartened, they're despondent, and they're looking for a spiritual solution to a very earnest question. Why does life suck? Do you know? And more importantly, I know better. Why is it that even though I know better, my life still sucks? So here's the context. Samadhi is a merchant who was betrayed by his family members. So his family, they were like interested in money or something, and so his sons were disobedient. His own wife apparently allegedly betrayed him, and the people who worked for him also betrayed him. So they all like cast him out of his own business empire or something like that. Yeah, exactly. So Rama is experiencing teenage angst, right, in the Yoga Vasishta, and he wants to become a sadhu, and then Vasishta is saying, bro, like, what will you accomplish there that isn't already here? Which Holy Mother Sarada Devi will say with regards to pilgrimage, what is there is here also. If you have it here, you'll have it there. Doesn't really matter where you go or what you do. So you'll notice almost all spiritual teachings start in this way because it starts with where we're at. And so arguably it's not until you're really like despondent and heartbroken and when you have these like serious questions about meaning and value, it's only then that you can really hear these teachings. Otherwise, it's just like a cultural project. That's why a lot of times when people are doing homa or doing puja, it's not it's not yeah, dick in the dirt. It's not it's good. It's not honest. Like, it's a lot of times it's not like very like spiritual. It's just cultural because you're doing these things, but you're not like really fucked yet. You're not in that place in your life where you're really hurt and really heartbroken. It's only when someone is leaving you, or someone has died, or you're in physical pain, or the world is like somehow chaotic in times of war, or times of economic or ecological collapse. It's in these times that the quest becomes earnest. And that's where all these texts start us off. They start us off with this quest of like, I'm really sad right now. Do you know? And that's why in the first chapter of the Gita, we have this yoga called the yoga of depression, or the yoga of grief. Vishada yoga is like when grief itself becomes a means. So the first gift that we get from the Divine Mother, and by the way, we'll offer the solution right now, and arguably from this point on, you will arguably never experience grief in the same way ever again. You'll never be despondent or depressed or sad. Not to say you won't experience grief, but after this conversation, which we're going to get from Rishiji, we're actually going to be free. Because the teaching, again, it's just a view. It's just like once you hear the view, you're set. And so before we hear the view, when somebody leaves us, it's really sad, actually. We think about the times that we had with them, we want them back in our life, and we miss them because we really love them and they were our person. You know, we share a lot with them. We might even have a way of speaking with one another that we don't share with anyone else in the world. You know, like how sweet it is. Like, I think about the things that me and my ex-wife used to like talk about, and the way that we used to talk, that's like unique to us, actually. Like, that's something that's like special. And so, you know, you feel sadness. I feel sadness around losing someone that is arguably like my person, you know? And so you feel like, okay, my mom or my father or my spouse, or arguably it could be an object like my house or my car, my mouse, my bar, whatever the case may be. It's like something that you consider to be yours. And there's something unique about that thing that makes it uniquely yours, unlike anything else in the world. There's something special about it. It's vishesha. And then comes grief when we lose it. Now, in the case of surata and samadhi, what they lost, they actually feel like they should not have any affection for anymore. So samadhi is like, my wife betrayed me, my sons betrayed me, my colleagues and workers betrayed me, but why do I still hanker after them? Why do I miss my wife? Why do I miss my children? Why do I miss my workers? Even though they all cast me out. I mean, essentially, why am I putting up with abuse? That's what like samadhi is essentially asking. Like, why do I continue to seek out those situations which are abusive, or those situations which are like not in keeping with my highest values? And you can see this is the conversation that maybe an addict would have too. Why do I keep like reaching for a substance that makes my life worse? And I know that I shouldn't be drinking, or I know that I shouldn't be doing this or doing that substance. Like, but if I know that and I keep doing that, then what the fuck is up? Do you know, I know, and Surata is saying, like, I know better than to harbor affection for my former wife and sons and workers. I'm never going to get them back. And also, even if I did get them back, they're treacherous. They betrayed me. Why would I then still love them? He can't quite understand his attachment to those things which he no longer has in his life and which he no longer cares to have in his life anymore. He hankers after that which he knows will do him no good. And samadhi is the same way. He's kicked out of his kingdom. He lost a war. And then after being weakened by the war, his ministers take advantage of his like new weakened position and like kick him out. And his concerns are so noble. He's like, they're going to waste all this money, which my ancestors worked really hard to like accumulate. And not only that, he thinks about his pets. He's like, what about my elephant? You know, that's one of his concerns. He's like, I have this elephant. It's his pet. And he's like, the word is bhoga, enjoyment, and it's usually translated as enjoyment, but really it just means food. Basically, his question is, what enjoyments will my chief elephant get now that I've lost him? Basically saying, will somebody feed my frog? Like, is anybody gonna feed my pet? Like, that's really his problem, you know? He loves his elephant, and he's worried that the elephant is going to be neglected. How beautiful. So he's worried about his elephant. He's worried about the money that his family has worked so hard over the course of generations to collect. He's worried about lineage and legacy. Like, he was the king who inherited the position from his father, who inherited it from his father before him, who inherited it from his father before him. No one in that house lost the kingdom like he lost the kingdom. So it's also an issue of pride and shame and family responsibility. So he's ashamed. He feels like he's let his lineage and ancestors down. He feels like he's like let his pets down and his finances are now in trouble. And he just like misses it. He misses being the king. He misses a life that he lived and knew and loved. And now he's reduced to wandering the forest in grief. So both the king and the merchant are in the forest alone, and they're sad. Their hearts are broken. And like, the whole misery loves company thing, there's something so beautiful about that moment when they find each other. You know, they find each other and they like compare stories and they realize it's like a very similar story, which is I think an important teaching. Notice here we get a very Śaiva move of moving away away from caste. So when you look at the Bhasha on the Brahma Sutra by Sri Ramanuja, there we learn a lot about Shaivas actually, because in the opening few verses, Ramanuja criticizes other schools of philosophy, one of them being Shaivism. And he says, look at these Shaivas. They're just initiating without any regard to caste whatsoever. So the Shaivas are unclean and unholy, not only because they live in cremation grounds and wear bone ornaments and eat God knows what, but mainly because they're initiating non-Brahmanas. They're teaching spiritual knowledge to people whose caste actually forbids them from learning spiritual knowledge. That's one of the first caricatures that we get of Shaivism from Sri Ramanuja. You know, and a good reference for this claim that I just made is Lorenzo's book on Kapalikas. David Lorenzo, he's a good academic, and there he talks about Kapalikas, and he makes a good point. He says, we learn about Kapalikas often from studying the work of their opponents. And in fact, we learn how pervasive Kapalika culture was in South India when we see what a formidable opponent they must have been for some of these people like Ramanuja. Because Ramanuja and various others will devote copious verses to dealing with this school. They wouldn't have done that if it wasn't a major school with major influence in the temples of South India. And so what we learn from Ramanuja is that the Śaiva is contemptible because they have no notion of caste. They don't really care for the age-old venerated tradition of caste. And that's exactly what we learn here with Surata and Samadhi. One is a Kshatriya, one is a Vaishya. They're from very different classes of society. One is a royal aristocrat, the other is a merchant. They're both from different classes of society. And when they meet, notice they have the same story. That's exciting. Whether you're in America or whether you're in Argentina, whether you're like in Timbuktu or like Botswana, like arguably whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever your socioeconomic status is, life is very painful. And often in exactly the same way as it is painful for everyone else from different socioeconomic backgrounds, from different places. We all love things and we all lose those things. And there's a great solidarity to that. So we are all in one caste. They call it the Eka Varna Bhairava, the one caste of Bhairava. But you know what it is? It's the caste of the sad, dejected, sad, lonely, and brokenhearted. Yeah, it's funny that Harshada would say Asha, Pasha here. There's like wordplay because Pasha means bondage, Asha means hope. There's Asha actually right there. So Asha, Pasha means the bondage of hope. But notice, Pasha is one of the weapons that Mother holds. So Asha, hope, which is a Pasha, that goad and that noose is a power. It's a Shakti actually. Asha, the power of hope. But what's happening here is that we're all brokenhearted because our hopes were unfulfilled. And yet we hope anyway. There's something about the human spirit that craves and that quests and that inquires even when it is met with disappointment after disappointment. So when we meet each other, if we are to be real with one another, we should look into each other's eyes and immediately recognize that in front of me is a person who has suffered greatly. This is a person who has loved and who has lost. And like me, this is a person who has been disappointed. And if we care to ask beyond the how are you, I'm fine, if we care to go deeper into that conversation, we'll realize that we have all been wronged in very similar ways. The circumstances might be different, but the pain is the same. I think this is a very beautiful moment in the Chandi where two people from different socioeconomic backgrounds get together and they both confide in one another and they both, it says in the Chandi, right? The merchant, seeing the friendly tone with which he's addressed by the king, decides to speak to him. And the two of them talk about how sad their lives have. They're broken men. And that's when spirituality begins. So we can always say like, thank God for those people that we've loved, that we've lost. Thank God for all the times we've been wronged. Thank God for oppressors and aggressors. Thank God for abuse. Thank God for trauma. Thank God for every shard of broken glass that I stepped on in this playground that cut me. Like, thank you for that. Because if not for that, I wouldn't be in the forest with my fellow grieving, broken humans. And I wouldn't be able to experience the intimacy of being heartbroken together. Once, I was in a bar in San Francisco. It was a really cool bar, actually. I don't even think it's real. It was like, I doubt that if I go there, it'll still be there. It was like, there was a bridge, and it was literally at the top of a bridge. And I was there with Ruby, actually, and we were both at the bar. And then she goes to the bathroom, and then I looked at this guy who's like sitting next to me, and I'm like, so I'm in a pretty confusing place. And so I like confide in him a little bit, like the way that you can at bars when it's like 4 in the, like, no, it was not 4, it was like 1:30 or whatever. And then he looks at me, you know what he says? Like, I laugh for like 5 minutes. He looks at me and in a drunken stupor says, well, you could always jump. That was his straight up solution to the predicament that I was in that moment. He's like, you could just jump. I thought it was so funny. And I was thinking about that, you know, like here we are, him and this one person, and there's me, and then Ruby gets back from the bathroom, it's like 4 of us, and this really awesome bartender, Antonio, and we're all just like there, and we're like 5 people in this mythological bar at the top of a bridge in downtown Phi San Francisco at like 2 in the morning. And I'm like, wow, we're all here, just like grieving and brokenhearted and in a complicated place in our lives. And that is a kind of intimacy which is really sacred. You know, it goes beyond all roles and cultural things. It's just like something about relating to someone on that level, you know. So that's what happens in the beginning of the Chandi. Grief, heartache, disappointment, and the kind of intimacy that dismisses all notions of caste or cultural background. But now notice, they don't just wallow. These two, Surata and Samadhi, they seek out a solution to their problem. And it just so happens that in the forest, they come upon a hermitage. It's important that the hermitage is in the forest, though, because the person who is there in the hermitage, Medas Muni, along with all of his disciples, are not living in the city the way Surata and Samadhi were living in the city. They literally like have their own community. They're outside of the city, and they seem to be living according to different values than the ones that are urbanly given, you know. So it's important that they're in the forest. They're there alone, they meet one another, they become friends, and it's important that they stumble upon a hermitage. This is like being really sad and being in a bookshop and then accidentally finding a book that gives you the answer to the problem that you have, or gives you like some hope at least, you know? So it's like that. They find this place, and because they're Indian, because they're in this like cultural context, they understand that a sage lives here. And the sage, who is a knower of Brahman, will have the answers to life's predicament. So they approach the sage. And then it says in the text, after doing all of the cultural things that would be appropriate to greet the sage, they then ask their question. And so the Kshatriya speaks on behalf of the Vaishya. It's kind of cute, actually. Like, they had a conversation, and the Kshatriya almost like naturally, by dint of character, takes the lead in this discussion and says, look here, this fucker, he's sad because his wife and children and workers betrayed him, and still he hankers after them. He cares for them. Still he feels an attachment to them. I'm sad because I was kicked out of my kingdom, and still I miss the things that I know I will never enjoy again, or that I should not enjoy anymore, because why would I go back to those people? What's the problem? Why are we suffering like this? And then the Rishi responds. So the Rishi here, after getting the cordialities and the opening kind of things, the Rishi then hears their problem and gives them a response. So I want to close now by just reading to you that response. It's a teaching on the view, actually. And you don't even need the rest of the Chandi. Arguably, in this teaching is already given the answer, which is going to be, what do you say, like extemporaneously developed throughout the rest of the Chandi. So if we go to verses, and this is the first chapter of the Chandi, the Devī Māhātmyam. This is the Pratamodhyayaha, the opening teaching. Here we get in verse 49, a profound teaching. So let me just find it real quick. Oh, I like this verse also, verse 17. I'll just like read it really quickly. Etachanyacha satatam chintayamasa bharativaha. Satatam, that's so beautiful. The king, or tatra viprashramabhyase vaishyamekam dadrisha saha. How to translate? The king was always, this translator says, Swami Jagadishwaranandaji says, the king was continually thinking of these and other things. And near the hermitage of the Brahmana, he saw a merchant and asked him, Ho, who are you? What is the reason for your coming here? Wherefore do you appear as if afflicted with grief and depressed in mind? Hearing the speech of the king uttered in a friendly spirit, the merchant bowed respectfully and replied to the king. So I like this framing of satatam chintayamasa. So the king is just in his head, like thinking about this stuff. That's what grief does to us. We reminisce and we ruminate and we like just like stew in the thought. So the king is like in a very relatable position right now. Which one of us has not been at a bar at 2 a.m. just ruminating and reminiscing and feeling grief around something that happened or is happening or is going to happen? So the king is afflicted with grief, and he meets another guy, the merchant, who is also afflicted with grief, and they get to talking. Okay, so here in verse 46, we get Rishir Uvacha. That's verse 46. It's important because this is the moment when the Rishi starts to speak. The whole thing is from a Rishi, Markandeya, a Chiranjeev. We actually went to his temple in Kashi. He's one of those like people who like lives forever, you know, because he was about to be taken by Yamaraj, and he built a Shiva Lingam, and he hugged the Shiva Lingam, and Yamaraj wasn't able to like pull him from his love for Shiva, and so Shiva comes and saves him and gives him eternal life. So that temple is still there. It's called Markandeya Mahadev. So this Markandeya, this young boy, this Chiranjeev, is giving this teaching to Krasushtuki, right? And so it is all from the mouth of a sage. But in the story, which is embedded in a story, which is embedded in another story, we get now the first utterance of Medas Muni, the Brahmana, the sage. So there's a Brahmana, there's a Kshatriya, and there's a Vaishya. And here's what the Brahmana says, Rishir Uvacha. The first word is Jnana. That's the most important thing, Jnana. Shaivism ultimately comes down to this. Abhinava Gupta opens his teaching with Jnana Moksha Hetuhu. Right? You know that one. Knowledge is the root of liberation. It's all this, whether you know or you don't know, whether you recognize or you don't recognize. Yeah, Harshada is saying, my guru said there is no one who hasn't cried themselves to sleep at night. There's no one who hasn't fallen on the floor of the bathroom and made promises to God. Wow. You get chills reading stuff like that. Grief is so honest. That's why I love these texts. They're so honest because they start with grief. They start with losers. You know, spirituality is not for winners. They're for like broken, sad, despondent losers. Thank God for that state. Vishada Yoga. So now, Rishiruvacha. Jnanamasti samastasya jantur vishaya gochare. Vishaya gochare, the field of the senses. Vishayascha mahabhaga yanti chaivam pritak pritak. Divandaha praninaha kechid ratra vandhas tatha pare. Kechid diva tatha ratro pranimas tulya drishtayaha. Jnanino manuja satyam kintu tena hi kevalam. Yato hi jnaninaha sarve pashupakshi mrigadayaha. So I was saying yesterday, Pakshin means bird, Mriga means deer, but like when he says Pakshin and when he says Mriga, he's basically referring to different kinds of animals. And he's saying Sarve, so all animals. Anyway, I'll get to the translation later. Let me just read a bit more from the Sanskrit. Jnanancha tan manushyana. Manushya means human, manusha. Yate sham Mriga Pakshinam. Again, Mriga, deer, Pakshin, bird. Manushyanam cha yate sham tulya manyat tato bhyayoho. Jnanepi sati pashetan pataganchava chanchushu kana mokshadritan mohat pidyamananapi kshudha manusha manuja vyagra sabilasaha sutan prati lobhat pratyupakaraya nanvetan kinapashi tathapi mava tavarte mohagarte nipatitaha mahamaya prabhavena samsara sthitikarina. What a line. Mahamaya prabhavena samsara sthitikarina. This whole samsara is the glory of Mahamaya, who is established in all things as all things. What did he just say is profound. Notice the constant repetition of the word jnana, the word mriga, the word pakshin, and the word manushya. Manush means human, pakshin means bird, mriga means like a mammal, like a deer, mriga. Jnana means knowledge. So this was the main thing I was trying to tell you yesterday. Here's what this Swami Jagadishwaranandaji will translate the verses as. The Rishi said, every being has the knowledge of objects perceivable by the senses. So here's an epistemological claim. An object of senses reaches it in various ways. Some beings are blind by day and others are blind by night. Notice a bat's vision of reality is very different from mine. They like see with their mouths, right? They're blind, but they're not. Bats are not blind. I mean, we say blind as a bat, but that's speaking from a very like human-centric point of view. The bat can see. That guy knows to like dodge the tree, but the way that he does it is very different from how I do it. In fact, I wouldn't be able to dodge that tree in the middle of the night. But the bat, he opens his mouth and he goes, ah! And like he knows the tree is there because the sound bounces in a particular way. That's fucking awesome. But like, yeah, he has echolocation. So notice the bat sees, or rather the bat perceives in its own way. Therefore, it's nocturnal. Other animals are diurnal. I'm blessed in the sense that, although I don't eat many carrots, I do have good night vision. But that's partly because I tend to like be active during the night. So over many years of being awake at night, I think my vision of nighttime has developed. But there are some people who don't like to be up at night, who like to do their things during the day. Arguably, through habituation, they don't see quite as well at night. So there are some humans who have better night vision, maybe vitamin A or whatever, and some humans who have worse night vision. But imagine those animals who are completely nocturnal. They can see perfectly well at night. They can't really see too well in the day, and vice versa. There are animals who don't see well at night, who see very well in the day. So diurnal and nocturnal animals. And then he says, and some beings have equal sight, both by day and by night. Human beings are certainly endowed with knowledge, but they are not the only beings to be so endowed. For cattle, birds, animals, and other creatures also cognize the objects of the senses. Continuing, the knowledge that men have, birds and beasts too have, and what they have, men also possess, and the rest, like eating and sleeping, is common to both of them. Okay, so I just want to stop here and say, the word pashu, like I was saying yesterday, refers to me, the human being, but also to the birds, to the cat that we saw a moment ago. There is no fundamental categorical difference between a jiva that is an animal, or a jiva that is a plant, and a jiva that is a human being. But you know what's important is this relativity that has just been pointed out. Every pashu sees in a different way. By jati, jati means species. So I, by species, I'm a human being, and therefore I see like a human sees. And that's going to be very different from how a bat sees. At this moment, I should acknowledge my humility on two levels. One, that I'm not the only kind of embodied being here in the world. Like, I share my status as an embodied jiva with every other animal that exists. So that's like equalizing. Shaivism's first teaching is that we're all animals, actually. Human animals are no better or worse than animals. There's no hierarchy. There's no sense that a human is better than an animal. That's the first thing. And therefore, if that's true, what will you do about caste? Isn't that beautiful? If there's no, if I'm not better than a cow, how can I be better than a Shudra? You know, it's a remarkable thing. And it's wonderful, you know, recently I visited a temple in the jungle. I'm from a Kshatriya family, and my grandmother had big hang-ups about going to that temple because it's like a Shudra temple, you know, and she didn't want to go there. She had this thing. But to her credit, I forced her to go because I really wanted to see that particular Kali in the jungle. And we went there and it was great. And it was so nice to see her sitting in this plastic chair with the priest there, and they were just having a chat. It was so cool to see. But notice that kind of communication, that rapport is possible when we dismiss all hierarchies, and only Kali can do that, arguably. Only she can reduce the high and elevate the low until we are all equal. And so no animal is higher or lower than me. You know, so it's not okay to eat animals because you're lower than me. You know, if you're eating animals, you have to know what you're doing. You're killing them and eating them. And we do that. I eat meat. I sit on a tiger skin asan, but it's not because I think I'm better than animals and therefore can use them. You know, and so that's why you'll see there's once somebody came to me at the Dhuni and they had some things to ask, and they were like, look, I've been to Sadhguru, I've been to this person, I've been to that person, no one was able to help, and so I've come here, and I said, it's a joke, isn't it? Everybody ends up with the agori at the end of the day. And then I gave him some bhasma, and my friend was there, Sambhavi was there, I gave him some bhasma, and he's like, please, you can live here on the property, just one thing, just don't eat any humans while you're here. And I start laughing, because I'm like, oh, I guess that's, because he's Indian, he gets it. You know, I'm sitting there and I've got my skull and I'm all in black, so he gets it. But then Sambhavi, it's so funny, she turns to him and she's like, what do you think he just smeared on your forehead? And then we all had a really big laugh about that. But arguably, the Aghori does not feel a repulsion about animal flesh. What is, I'm not confessing to eating humans here, the Reddit will go wild, but is it really that different from eating animal flesh? Is a human not an animal? Is an animal not on the same level as a human? Either you eat everything or you eat nothing. That's the Aghori standard. Either everything or nothing. Do you know? No, we can't choose. There's no sense of oh, this is medicine, this is poison. No, if I'm going to eat medicine, I can eat poison. Do you know, if I can eat this, and therefore I can eat everything. For in fact, all of this is Shiva. So our claim is that there's no killing. That's why we kill animals, because we don't think that we're killing them. At no point have I killed anything. You can't kill anything. And arguably this is the first teaching of the Bhagavad Gītā. He who thinks he is the killer and he who thinks he is killed, both are ignorant of the truth, O Arjuna. And that's a very scary thing for humans who think they are bodies. How timid they are. Do you know, warriors know that it is a sacred duty to kill and be killed. For everyone that you kill, you release. And every time you are killed, you are released. I'm not saying you should go out and kill people. I'm just saying you should finish with the idea that you can.
Then eat them.
Yeah, anyway. So Aghoris can digest anything. And we prove it too. Give us some datura, and we'll eat that shit. Like, we'll eat anything. Like, give us feces, give us datura, and we will show you what kind of digestion the fire of consciousness is capable of doing. And if that thing poisons us and dies, you think we care? You think that there's any real, genuine Aghori who cares whether they live or die? That's why you can put anything in our hand, nails if you want, and we'll eat it. Because we couldn't care less if we cough blood, or if we die today, or if we die tomorrow. We don't need bedtimes, we don't need regular diets. Like, we're dead already. What can you do to one who has already become a ghost? So, I digress. What was the point? Oh, in Shaivism, notice, there's Dharma. There is no comparison between the human and the animal. But that's the first thing that I should be humble about, the humility of recognizing that we're all the same. But the second thing I should be humble about is the relative nature of my point of view. Because the bat sees a very different world from the one that I see. How do I know that the world that I'm looking at now is the world? It's just the world that my senses are reporting to me. And this whole thing becomes even more complicated when we consider that human animals don't just see through their five senses, they see through their conditioning. So I am conditioned to see the world in a certain way. I might be racially conditioned to fear certain races and be like attracted to others. And that will color my reality. I might be conditioned to see money as a good thing or money as a bad thing, and that might change what I do when I show up for my day-to-day interactions with the world or my night-to-night interactions with the world. The point I'm making is that, like, it's not just the relativity of the senses, which has already been acknowledged, it's also the relativity of the mind. So human animals see the world differently from like regular like animals, but humans also see the world differently from one another. So the first Śaiva teaching is to say that every animal and every human share ontological status, and each and every one of us will have a unique vantage point that's relative to the kind of body and the kind of mind we have, and it's all valid. So you'll see this is the essential teaching of the Ramakrishna lineage, to never have a bad word to say about any lineage, which is very hard to practice. In the course of this lecture, I already failed that teaching, you know, because I disparaged certain Buddhist traditions. You know, like that's like already saw the moment in which I'm making friendly but fun jokes at the expense of certain traditions, which I'm calling non-dynamic and static. To really practice Sri Ramakrishna was something that Swami Vivekananda struggled to do. He criticized American Christians, you know. He was like, oh, your religion is not real Christianity. It's just like capitalism and things. Then he went back and cried. Because if you really believe in Sri Ramakrishna, you would not have said that. You would never disparage anybody. You would never say, oh, that person is spiritual, that person is not spiritual. They're just spiritual in different ways. You can't say that American Christianity is not real Christianity. You can't say capitalism, consumer capitalism is false. How could you do that? The moment you do that, you're already privileging your way of seeing things above other people's way of seeing things, which are just as valid as yours. They're all just relative to that person. So relative to that person, that's how they want to articulate spirituality. Relative to you, this is how you want to articulate spirituality. And both are equally valid because there's no hierarchy in beings, and therefore there's relativity, and there's no hierarchy in the relative frames either. You know, so to truly practice the Ramakrishna view, is just to not have anything bad to say about anyone. And that's like a Śaiva teaching, that these are all relative ways of looking at the world. Okay, continuing now. So then he says, look at these birds, which though they possess knowledge and are themselves distressed by hunger, are yet, because of the delusion, engaged in dropping grains into the beaks of their young ones. Human beings are, O tiger among men, attached to their children because of greed for return help. Do you not see this? Even so, men are hurled into the whirlpool of attachment, the pit of delusion, through the power of Mahamaya, the great illusion, who makes the existence of the world possible. Here he's translated prabha as power, but it could also be glory. Mahamaya prabhavena samsara sittikarina. This whole thing is established by Mahamaya. This samsara is established by Mahamaya, and it is through her glory that this comes to be. So this is important because samsara is now not presented in negative terms as a problem. It's presented realistically though. It's a place where there is suffering, and he's already explained the nature of that suffering. It's a kind of delusion. It's a kind of attachment. We'll get into that in just a bit. That will be the closing teaching and the kind of summary teaching, which is maybe the most important thing we could hear in this talk. But it's important to point out that samsara is not now called an illusion, it's called glory. It is the glory of Mahamaya, who is Karini. She is the one who establishes, Sthitta Karini. She has established this samsara as an expression of her glory. Now, in Paramārthasāra, we get two verses that I want to reference now with regards to this teaching. So if I'm going to say like this is a Śaiva teaching, I should probably point to a Śaiva text and like prove it. This is the standard I hope that you will hold me to. It's very important that we like look to scripture and we have citation. So in the Paramārthasāra, in verse 5, we get this fraction of the verse that says, Shiva eva grihitva pashubhavaha. This is verse 5 of the Paramārthasāra. Here we learn that Lord Shiva, eva, alone, pashubhava, grihitva, he takes on the bhava, the attitude of a pashu. So he alone is embodied as every pashu, which means the mriga, the pakshin, it means the cow, it means nitya lila, it means nish, it means anahata, it means all of us. Each and every one of us are pashus, and Shiva alone becomes all the pashus. And it's said that there's all these different bodies and all these different bhuvanas, and each body experiences each bhuvana according to its own apparatus, and Shiva alone becomes all of this. And so, in a sense, we're almost like acknowledging an aesthetic claim, that there is an aesthetic purpose to being a pashu, because then you can experience something of this reality that's unique and different. So why would Shiva want to be a pashu if he's already Shiva? Arguably, what he gets from being a pashu is the ability to see in a particularized way, which is uniquely valuable. Because it's a point of view, you know, it's like he just wants to listen to metal music or something. So like he becomes Sonu and Asha, like driving home from the hike. It's like in that moment, he wants metal. But in another moment, like just yesterday, I was in this house and like there's these huge speakers. The kind of speakers that like if I stand up, I think they'll bowl me over, you know? And I'm just like there, like listening to these speakers. And I turned to the guy who's like playing music from the Spotify, and I'm like, do you like Korn? Because in that moment I was like, I really want to hear Twisted Transistor out of these speakers. And he was like, nah, I don't really like metal, I'm just like, I like EDM. So then he introduces me to like this whole range of electronic music, EDM, right? And it's interesting because in that moment I'm just listening to EDM, you know, for like hours. I'm just like listening to EDM. And then I fell asleep on the couch watching Stargate. Do you remember Stargate? It's like that series where the Americans are space colonizers and they go to... Anyway, so it's like a 2003 TV show. Very nostalgic. It's like Xena, kind of like that kind of style. So anyway, I'm listening to EDM and I'm like, in this moment, I'm not going to be listening to any metal. I'm only listening to EDM. EDM is great and metal is great. But like in that moment, they're mutually exclusive. I can't both listen to Korn and... I couldn't even name the EDM band. I feel so whoops. But like who I was listening to, you know? And so you could argue like there's value to listening to the heavy metal group, the new metal group, and there's value to listening to EDM. And so Shiva incarnates as both individuals in order to see from both perspectives to enjoy the reality more. So yeah, so here comes Shiva as the pashu in order to experience relativity. So relativity here is not a problem, it's an opportunity. And so coming to verse 15 now, Maya is Devī Māhātmyam Shakti. And Abhinava says that this is the Svatantriya Shakti, the power of Lord Shiva's autonomy and freedom. And it is there to manifest this like contraction, this relativity, this limited knowledge. Why? Because for no other reason, because Shiva likes it. Shiva eva grihitva pashubhavaha. The way that he's able to do that though is through Maya. So Maya is described now not as an illusion or avidya. It's described as a real glory or a real power. It's the prabhavena. It's through the power and glory of Mahamaya, who is essentially Shiva's power. Shiva is Mahamaya actually. Shiva swabhavaiva iti shaktihi. This power is desire. It's the desire to be. It's the desire to cognize. It's the desire to act. So this is Icha. It's Icha, meaning it's Shakti, it's dynamism, it's will, or rather desire. So it's a good thing actually. It's a good thing that there are pashus. It's a good thing that each pashu, whether a deer or a bird or a human, sees uniquely in its own way. And it's not a problem if that's the case. But what is the problem though? Here comes the teaching. And you know in the Bhagavad Gītā, in this text also, there'll be these like, oh, scorcher of foes. Oh, best of the Pandavas. Oh, and here it says, oh, tiger among men. It's like really sweet because these teachers, they don't just teach you, they also inspire you. And they say like, you're a tiger among men. You are a great king and here you are despondent. Let's look at the nature of your sadness. Look at these birds. They're fucking idiots. That's basically what he's saying. He's saying like, look at them. They don't even have food for themselves. They're hungry. And yet, what food they have, they're giving to their children. Notice the attachment they have for their children. It's dilulu actually, because like the whole thing is premised upon some kind of transaction. Sri Ramakrishna used to say the same thing. He would say, look at these people. They barely have enough money for themselves, and yet they keep on reproducing. What's up with that? You know, he's not saying like sex is bad. It's hardly the teaching there. He's just saying that like people are stupid for reproducing when they don't even have enough resources for themselves. But if you ask them why they're reproducing, they'll give you some weird like teaching about how like we are supposed to have children or that it's good to have children or something. Yeah, that could be the case. But notice there's some selfishness to it. Like often when we give birth to a child, that child is often seen as an extension of our ego, and that's why we become controlling. We think that what that child does reflects something about us. But how could that be? Like the genetics are so random. Like you can inherit genetics from all sorts of parts of the bloodline that you can't like claim responsibility for the child. It's not your genetics that the child shares. It's like every fucked up gene that your entire family has. I once saw this really funny meme on the internet where it was like a woman giving a child a book and she's like, "Here, my dear, this is the lore of our family," and the book just said DSM-5. So it's really important to point out that like your kids are not your kids. We gave a lecture on it like 5 years ago. Your kids are absolutely not your kids. You are not your body, and that which comes from your body is not coming from you. And they don't inherit anything from you. They just inherit the genes that are part of the pool of your bloodline. You can't claim ownership of that kid. And it's so important that like you recognize that love as a selfish love. It's very hard actually to love people when they're your people, because then you'll be willing to do anything and everything for your people, which often includes horrific acts of violence against other people. Almost all acts of violence are done in the name of love. A selfish love for one's own tribe, one's own family, one's own kith and kin. So this Sri Ramakrishna calls Maya. There are only two words that you need to learn here. Maya as opposed to Daya. Maya means attachment, which is specific love for specific people with whom you have specific relationships, like my children, my spouse, my house, my mouse. If I can say mine, me and mine, that mamata, that's what accounts for grief and suffering. So there's a delusion here, and the delusion is the delusion of attachment, which comes from the feeling that these people are mine. But again, the root of that delusion, the sense of me and mine, is again this relativity. So like I was saying last night, it's not knowledge. It's not a lack of knowledge that causes suffering. It's surety about my vantage point as being the totality of all things. Like seeing seeing the horizon of my own knowledge and considering it to be all knowledge is ignorance. So I look at what I know and I say there's all there is to know. And because of that like lack of knowledge, rather lack of complete knowledge, that's why I get attachment. If I knew what I was, I would know that everyone is my friend. Everyone is my child. Everyone is my spouse. Everything is my house. The sky thy roof, the grass thy bed. So being able to love the person that's in front of you the way that you would love every other person in the world is the calling, is the hallmark of the sadhu. Like what it takes to be a sadhu is not being naked in the smashan wondering about. What it takes to be a sadhu is equal love for all beings without any sense of this being is uniquely special or different from any other being. And that's what makes a sadhu's life both the loneliest thing in the world and also the most fulfilling, rewarding, deep thing in the world. Because when you relate to people on this level, what you get is more real. You know, like once on a plane, this woman was holding my hands and weeping and she said, "You must be very lonely." You know, it was really sweet. She said that. And she's like, "I don't know where your mother is, but I know that she's proud of you." It was so touching. And like in that moment, I'm like, this connection that I'm having in this moment on the plane, actually flying to Ashland. It was actually so interesting. It was on the flight to Phoenix where I had that 7-hour layover where I met Srija Devi, and that was on the way to Portland where Grasini picked me up, and then we went down to Ashland. It was actually that trip. But that lady, in that moment, we shared something that is so real and so deep, and though I'll never see her again, maybe, that interaction, like there's an honesty and an intimacy when there aren't any expectations or roles. So if it's my child has to behave in a certain way, and if they don't behave in that way, that will like interrupt the intimacy that I can have with them. Or my spouse or my house, unless they are the way that I want them to be, there can be a problem. But if I'm in front of somebody and there's nothing to gain or nothing to lose, there's a possibility of some kind of love there that we argue is deeper. This we call daya. Daya means compassion, or I think Nikila Devi has a better interpretation here, unconditional love. Like unconditional love in that there's no condition for the intimacy and presence that we feel together. There's nothing to gain, nothing to lose. No one will keep you here if you want to leave, and no one will push you away if you want to stay. That kind of love requires a certain level of freedom that we often don't have. And why don't we have it? Because of the glory of Mahamaya, who establishes this samsara, where I feel that certain people are my people and certain places are my places. So thinking that I have a home is a very big problem. You know, you should wander the world. What does Shankara say? The three worlds are my home. Shiva is my father, Parvati is my mother, and all the bhaktas of Lord Shiva are my family members. I roam the three worlds. They are my home. So have thou no home, friend. What home can hold thee? The sky thy roof, the grass thy bed, and food what chance may bring. Well cooked or ill, judge not. For no food can taint that noble soul which knows itself. Like that idea that I will eat whatever I am given. I have no sense of, this is my diet and this is not my diet. Again, that's Maya. The idea that some things are good and some things are bad. The Agori sadhana of just like eating horrible things is really just a shock exposure therapy to dispensing. You know, people try to be healthy. What they suffer from is not the lack of, what they suffer from is the mindset that they're unhealthy and need to protect themselves from things that would make them unhealthy. Arguably, if they had them, don't take this too seriously. Obviously, we're all working with different karmas here. But arguably, if you were so arrogantly sure of your health, in one sense, that would be a kind of health. Even if the body is fucked by it, that would be a kind of health, right? And so there's a sense in which being indiscriminate with food, being indiscriminate with places, and being indiscriminate with people, that is purifying. So there's a sense in which like whatever food you get through begging is purified through the act of begging. Or like whatever interaction you have without any expectation, without wanting anything or without fearing anything is a good interaction. So like that sadhu bhava is the gift of Kali. Kali gives that. She gives us the ability to wander the three worlds, feeling at home anywhere, to be with anyone and feel like we're in family with them, that to feel like you own everything and nothing at all. That fearlessness is arguably what we lose when we take our limited view to be the totality. So the first claim here is that our love is selfish. It's not really love. It's a sanctified shopkeeping. You know, so yeah, isn't that really nice? So Esha Devi is asking a really good question here. I'll come to it in just a moment. And so here we're applying Viveka. We're looking, say, look at these birds. So this is the Viveka, the discernment. Look at them. They're so stupid. They don't even have enough food, and yet they go on reproducing and giving their children food. Like, notice, there's a kind of selfishness there. And now he's going to say, look, do you not see this? Even so men are hurled into the whirlpool of attachment, the pit of delusion, through the power of Mahamaya, who makes the existence of the world possible. Marvel not at this. This Mahamaya is the Yoga Nidra of Vishnu, the Lord of the world. It is by her that the world is deluded. Verily she, the Bhagavati, Mahamaya, forcibly drawing the minds of even the wise, throws them into delusion. She creates this entire universe, both moving and unmoving. It is she who, when propitious, becomes a boon giver to human beings for their final liberation. She is the supreme knowledge, the cause of final liberation, and eternal. She is the cause of the bondage of transmigration and sovereign over all lords. So this is the first teaching of the Chandi. It starts with the claim that Pashus are just equally fucked because we're all seeing from our relative point of view, and because of that, this is where the rub is, right? Because of that, we have attachment, and because of that attachment, we experience grief. And if you look at nature, you'll see that we're all under the same delusion. The birds are fucked, humans are fucked, everyone is fucked, and that's good because that's just how Mother plays. It's how Shiva plays. In Somananda, somebody asked him, what about hell? Like, okay, Shiva is playing. Why is there hell? Like, why in this world of Lord Shiva, where he has perfect autonomy over all things, why would beings go to hell? Somananda straight up bites the bullet, and he says, imagine you were a king. Won't you get bored of being a king? One day, you might like to play the game of being a common foot soldier in the trenches. So use the term trenches. It's very like modern almost. Why would you want to get like, what do you call it, trench foot? Why would you want to get trench foot in the trenches, like in war, when you can just be in a palace and be free? Arguably because the one experience that you cannot have in the palace on your throne is what it's like to get trench foot in the trench. I mean, that's kind of like awesome. Like this like valorous, like you've got your like Enfield rifle up against your chest, and you're like having bond of brotherhood with people, and you're like, go on without me, and there's shells exploding all over. Like, that is an experience that we even pay money for in the context of video games and movies and VR and escape rooms. Why the fuck are there escape rooms? Explain that. The very fact that we like to put ourselves in situations where we like fight with our spouses about some kind of nonsense riddle in order to get out of the room is enough metaphysic for me. That already explains why Shiva would want this. The whole thing is an escape room, and escape rooms are something that allegedly Americans pay like $50 to experience. So what Somananda argues is that like Shiva wants to go to hell. Do you know? It's wonderful. If you're in hell, there's an experience that you have there that for you in that moment is valuable. So that's why we're not so afraid of things like addiction, because often this teaching can lead to maybe a narcissism. It can lead to an addiction. Like if I just say do what you want, what people are afraid of is that they'll be addicted. I don't know. Whenever I meet addicts, it's usually those people who are doing something that have a problem with what they're doing that causes that thing to have power over them. You know, often an addict is somebody who is self-hating, who is guilty and shameful about what they're doing, and that's what they're arguably susceptible to. So then they need to do that substance to escape the feeling of powerlessness. If instead they were like, this is fine, this is good, I'll just enjoy this as much as I want, sometimes psychologically that's what helps you finish with it. But we have to admit, this is not true for everybody, we're all different. And so if I say to somebody, do what you want, that person might become addicted to something, and that addiction might be a veritable hell for them and for their loved ones. And if such a person is headed to that hell, is it a bad thing? Somananda would say whether it's the hell on earth or the literal metaphysical hell which Hinduism accepts, it's still something that Shiva values. So Shiva wants to become this fucked up, like grief-inducing, like grief-stricken fool. But he also wants to be free of that. And when you approach the Rishi, it's when Shiva is experiencing this other movement where he turns towards himself again, which arguably is what we all want here. So now what the Rishi is saying is, if you want to be free, first acknowledge that you are under the delusion of Mahamaya. And essentially that delusion is me and mine. This is my wife. This is my life. And thus this is my strife. Do you know? And it shows up in interesting ways. You know, earlier I'm like sneezing in the car, right? Recovering from last night. And Dave is like, oh, poor thing, you're sneezing. And I'm like, she has a mother's heart, you know? And I was like, who's sneezing? Huh? Who's sneezing? Who will have the medicine? Like in that moment, I have to be careful. Because if I, in that moment, slip up, I am reifying the notion that I am sneezing. This is Prakriti. I could not care less for this thing. And it creeps up on you. You get the sense that like, this is my body. You know, notice how we make claims about this as if it's somehow separate from all of this. How old are you?
56.
13.7 billion at least. The only way you would be able to say that you are 56 is by cordoning off one part of matter from everything else. How ridiculous. Like, it's impossible to say that table is somehow materially distinct from that suitcase. And so how can this body then be distinct from that table and that suitcase? In what sense is this 29? In what sense is that 56? In what sense is any of this my fucking problem? Whether it lives or dies is mother's problem. Do you know, whether the mind is happy or despondent or in grief is mother's problem. So like in moments like that, we see how mamata creeps in. My body, my mind. And once I say my body, my mind, I will say my house, my spouse, my mouse, my wife, my life, my strife. And so there's a joy to that, but there's arguably an even greater joy to this, to realizing daya, the compassion that we feel for all beings. So Sri Ramakrishna says this is the difference. Love for some people is Maya, love for all people is daya. And the Divine Mother, Kali or Bhagavati Mahamaya, she causes us to feel Maya, the feeling of affection for some people, and through her grace, when she's propitious, she gives us daya, compassion for all human beings. So now the king says, Surata, Raja Vacha, he says, Venerable Sir, who is that Devi whom you call Mahamaya? How did she come into being? And what is her sphere of action? O Holy One, what constitutes her nature? What is her form? Wherefrom did she originate? All that I wish to hear from you, O you supreme among the knowers of Brahman. And then the Rishi Ravacha, he says, she is eternal, embodied as the universe. By her all this is pervaded. Nevertheless, she incarnates in manifold ways. Hear it from me. Shruyata mama. Hear it from... So now, I just want to leave you with this. It's all well and good to talk about Maya and Daya, but the fact is we're all under the jurisdiction of the Divine Mother. So even if I want to be, like, it's not my body, it's not my mind, this is not my life, it doesn't change that on some subconscious level I still believe this to be my body, I believe these people to be my people, and so I feel sad when they leave or when they're not the way I want them to be. That, arguably, we cannot overcome by sheer stubbornness alone. That requires grace. But notice what happens here. It's like, this guy is so sad, he's so despondent, but then he hears about this Mahamaya. And now, the thing that he's interested in is the goddess. Like, notice, the first thing that the Chandi will do for you, the way that this will help you now with the grief that you're experiencing in your life now, is just by giving you something else to think about and something that's really fun to think about. So notice it's already started to work. The moment that the Rishi says there's this power called Mahamaya, and it's because of her that you experience grief, and it's because of her that all of this is happening at all. The moment he hears about this Mahamaya, he wants to know more. He's like, oh my God, who is this woman? Who is this power? Can you tell me more? What is she like? Where did she come from? Why does she do this? That already is the practice, because now he's thinking about something other than himself. So to me, like at this point, having spoken to so many people in the context of satsang and whatnot, I'm starting to realize that like mature spirituality, I don't know, it's hard to say what mature spirituality is or isn't. How would I know? But I think there are people whose questions are not about their lives, but about Kali. And there are people whose questions are about their lives. So they're like, how can I heal? How can I be better? How can I feel better? Their locus is still themselves. And so they're saying me, me, me. And if they say ma, essentially they're saying, what can ma do for me? So they're in spiritual life because they want to be happy. They want to feel better. They want to heal. And that's like perfectly legit, perfectly valid. But then there are those who come to spiritual life, and once they hear about ma, they forget all about me because ma is so interesting. So now their questions are about ma, not about their own practice. They don't even ask, what mantra should I chant? Because they don't even have the presence of mind to think about their own practice. Instead, they're like, okay, tell me about Matangi, or tell me about this other form. Like their whole spiritual life, the locus is now around Ma. And this I call upasana. So spiritual life is not about you. Never ask, I would argue, if you're making progress or not. Who gives a fuck? Who gives a fuck if I'm free, if I'm healed, if I'm making spiritual progress? How can I care about those things when there is something way more interesting to think about? Kali. So you're thinking about Kali, that's already the solution to any one of our problems. It's just giving us something else to think about, something way more worthy of our thought. Why? Because it's more beautiful, it's richer, it's deeper. So I think that is the teaching, that we are, each and every one of us, embodied souls. By Shiva's will, we become embodied souls. And each and every one of us sees the world differently, so there should be a lot of humility around other people's views. They're all equally valid, equally legit ways of seeing the world. And more importantly, because of this partial knowledge, I am led to think that these things are good for me. I don't know what's good for me. And then I become attached to those things that I think are good. So we should also have the humility to say, I'm only attached because of my partial view. If I have a wider view, I wouldn't see the same things. I wouldn't think the same things. I wouldn't feel the same things. And then the next bit of humility here is that I can of my own self do nothing. Mother alone will free me or will bind me. So all I can do then is propitiate the Divine Mother. But the first way of propitiating her is just about forgetting myself and just thinking about her. So I used to ask my guru questions like, okay, do I meditate like this? How do I do Purasharana like that? And often I would be frustrated because his only response would often be, love God. Love God. There's a simplicity to Ramakrishna's teachings. But it's not simple, because to love God is to love God in the way that you love God, given that every vantage point, every relative view is as valid as every other vantage point, as every other valid view. So choose any representation of Ma that you like, or even a male form, knowing it to be nothing other than this Mahamaya. Fall in love with that form, and then spend the rest of your days worshipping that, thinking about that, chanting that name, and dwelling and immersing your mind in that. And arguably through the grace of that, we come to this position where we experience daya and not maya. When I can love all equally, then we were truly recipients of her grace. Okay, leave it at that. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Shri Saradarpanam Astu. Om Namas Chandikaye.